Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dream Galaxy. Today, I will share the history of what beauty standards looked like in Middle Ages. Before we begin, let me know when and where are you watching this video from. So let's start. The candlelight flickers softly against the stone walls, casting shadows that dance like memories from a world long past. Close your eyes for a moment and let the quiet of the evening carry you back through the centuries, to a time when the concept of beauty was woven not from magazines or glowing screens, but from the delicate threads of faith, nature, and the whispered secrets of the apothecary's garden. Here in the medieval world, the mirror was not a sheet of flawless glass, but the still surface of a pond, a polished piece of metal, or the approving gaze of one's community. Beauty was a language, a silent poetry written on the body and soul, and it spoke of virtue, of lineage, and of a divine order that held the cosmos in its gentle, unyielding grasp. Imagine the misty morning light spilling over the thatched roofs of a small village. The air thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. The first face you see belongs to a young woman drawing water from the well. Her skin, untouched by the potions and paints of a later age, is pale from a life lived mostly in the shade of the home and the hood of her cloak. This paleness is not a sign of frailty alone, but a mark of status, a quiet proclamation that she does not toil under the harsh sun of the fields like the peasants who bend their backs to the wheat. Her hair, the color of ripened barley, is bound modestly beneath a linen wimple, but a few strands have escaped to frame a face that is round and smooth, with a high, unlined forehead. To the medieval eye, this is a canvas of great loveliness. The forehead itself is a feature of immense importance, so much so that women will go to the curious and painful lengths of plucking their hairlines back, sometimes with tweezers of bone or shell, sometimes with a paste of quicklime that burns the hair away, to create a sweeping, domed expanse that speaks of nobility and intellect. A high forehead, you see, was like a polished ivory tower, a place where noble thoughts could reside, a feature so prized that it was celebrated in poem and painting alike. Walk now from the village to the castle on the hill, where the lady of the manor sits in her solar, the room filled with the soft luminescence of a window glazed with oiled cloth. She is listening to a troubadour sing of unattainable love, his voice a silken thread weaving through the tapestry of the afternoon. This lady of noble birth embodies the very ideal of courtly beauty. Her posture is a study in disciplined grace, her spine a straight column, her hands resting delicately in her lap. For a body that slumped or gestured wildly was considered a mark of a disordered soul. Her gown, a flowing river of deep blue wool, drapes over her form, its voluminous folds completely obscuring the lines of her body. And here lies a profound difference between their world and ours. medieval ideal did not celebrate the explicit curve of a hip or the dip of a waist. The female form, in its fashionable perfection, was a landscape of soft, rolling hills, a columnar shape that emphasized a gently swelling belly, a symbol of fertility and abundance. To be slender was to invite suspicion, a whisper of meagerness, of a lack of generosity, perhaps even of a sour and stingy nature. The beautiful body was a generous body, a vessel of plenty, clad in garments that suggested, rather than revealed, the treasures within. The script of beauty was written in a code of colors, each a syllable of a secret language. The troubadour's song might praise a lady's lips, which should be red, but not just any red. They should be the red of a rose in its first blush of dawn, the red of a ripe cherry, the red of fresh spilled blood that signaled vibrant, humming life. The cheeks, too, should bloom with a similar rosy flush, a natural proof of modesty and health, a fleeting blush that came and went like a summer cloud, but for those upon whom nature had not bestowed such a bloom. The wily arts of the cosmetician were never far away. From the still room of the castle, or the hut of the village wise woman, came the subtle paints. The root of the alkanet plant, steeped in oil, yielded a ruby stain for the lips. A rouge for the cheeks could be conjured from sandalwood, or from the earthy red mineral we call hematite, ground to a fine powder and mixed with animal fat. Yet the church fathers, in their high stone pulpits, thundered against such artifice. To paint the face, they warned, was to deface God's image, a sin of pride that summoned the devil's laughter. Beauty was to be a reflection of inner grace, not a mask of base cunning. And so, a profound tension danced through the medieval mind, a longing for the idealized aesthetic of the rosy-cheeked maiden, forever at war with the spiritual terror of vanity. A woman who painted too boldly risked being painted herself by moralists as a daughter of Eve, a temptress who concealed the serpent's scales beneath a fair complexion. Thus, the highest praise a beauty could receive was that her loveliness was natural, an effortless emanation of a pure soul, a gift from the Virgin Mary herself, whose own face in the icons was always pale, serene, and untouched by earthly pigment. Let your thoughts settle now on the mouth of this ideal. It should be small, a tiny, puckered bud, a rosebud mouth, as the poets endlessly cooed. A wide mouth was a mark of a glutton or a scold, an opening too generous with words or appetites. The breath that passed through those little lips was to be sweet, scented with the chewing of fennel seeds, parsley, or the mint that grew rampant in the kitchen garden. Teeth, when glimpsed in a rare laugh, were to be small, even, and as white as a polished ivory chess piece. Though in a world without dentistry as we know it, such a display was a true gift of genetics. The nose, straight and fine, was the centerpiece, and the eyes, the windows of the soul. Their color was less important than their luster. They were to be clear, bright, and shining, with the light of intelligence and chastity. Gray eyes were likened to a calm sea, blue to the heavens, brown to the warm earth. But green, a rare and startling green, was often a sorceress's color, a wild, unpredictable magic that could lead a man to ecstasy or ruin. The eyebrows were to be dark and slender, like two arched bows drawn back from that magnificent high forehead, plucked meticulously into thin crescents, and the lashes, dark and long, were to cast a modest, downcast shadow upon the cheek. For the direct, bold stare of a woman was a dangerous thing, a lance that could pierce a man's composure. A beautiful woman's gaze was one of sweet, submissive indirectness, a fleeting look from under lowered lids, a promise whispered and instantly withdrawn. The texture of beauty extended to the very surface of the body. The skin was to be smooth, firm, and luminously white, not the wan white of illness, but the opalescent white of a lily petal, the creamy white of fresh milk, the luminous white of moonstone, the blemish of a freckle, the red blotch of a blemish, the roughness of a scar. These were imperfections that disturbed the placid surface of the ideal. And so, the recipes of the time are filled with the hunt for the perfect complexion. A lady might wash her face in the morning dew collected from the grass, believing it held the pure essence of the plant's soul. She might apply a mask of ground lily root and honey, or a paste of breadcrumbs and rosewater to soothe and whiten. The pursuit of a white skin could take a darker turn. With the use of ceruse, a paste of white lead and vinegar, it covered every flaw like a smooth, white velvet curtain. But it was packed with poison, slowly graying the flesh beneath, eating at the gums, and causing a slow wasting that was, with a terrible irony, sometimes interpreted as a romantic, consumptive pallor. A recipe for a skin lightener might call for the juice of lemon, for the crushed bodies of small snails, or for the powdered bone of a cuttlefish, mixed with the oil of sweet almonds, to be applied at night, while whispering a prayer to Saint Agatha, patroness of smooth skin. The body, too, was anointed and bathed, though not with our modern obsession with sterile lathering. A full immersion bath was a ritual, often taken in a large wooden tub before a fire. The water scented with lavender, rosemary, and rose petals, herbs that cleaned and perfumed, warding off the sickly humors that were thought to cause disease. Hair washing was a gentle affair, with a lye made from the ash of burnt vines and water, followed by a rinse of herb-scented rainwater to leave the tresses gleaming like spun gold. Golden hair, if there is one image that has survived the centuries as the quintessence of the medieval belle, it is the maiden with the long, golden locks. The shade was compared to the finest beaten gold, to sunbeams trapped in silk, to fields of ripe corn rippling in a soft wind. cult of the blonde was so powerful that women from the warm South, with their dark, lustrous curls, would sit for hours on the sun-drenched battlements of their castles, their hair spread out around them, soaked in a bleaching mixture of lye, lemon juice, and saffron, waiting for the sun god to kiss their tresses into the desired gold. A headpiece called a solana, a broad-brimmed hat with the crown cut out, allowed the hair to be pulled through the top and fanned out over the brim, soaking in the light, while the face remained in the protected shade, preserving that precious pallor. The hair itself was not a geometric, blunt-cut shape. It was a cascade of soft waves, a living, silken river that flowed from a central part down the back, often to the knees. It was to be thick and abundant, a sign of vitality and procreative power. To lose one's hair was a woman's private tragedy, and tonics of honey, aloe, and even the ashes of burnt frogs were rubbed into the scalp to coax it back. Once she was married, however, this glorious, tempting banner of her maidenhood was covered. The hair, the primary symbol of her allure, was bound up, coiled into plaited ram, horns over her ears, or coiled into a golden net of silk and pearls, and then hidden under the starched white linen of a veil and wimple. The act of veiling was a public ceremony of her transition, a declaration that her beauty was now a private, walled garden, reserved for the gaze of her husband alone. To see a married woman's hair was an act of profound intimacy, a stolen glimpse into a forbidden sanctuary. The beauty of the male body in the medieval world was written in a different meter. Yet, it was no less rigorously composed. A beautiful man was an embodiment of chivalric virtue. His physical form, a direct echo of his moral strength. Think of the effigy of a knight in a cool, echoing cathedral, carved in alabaster, his hands pressed together in eternal prayer. He is not a swollen mass of muscle, a brutish, threatening shape. The medieval ideal of male beauty was elegant and erect. A tall, slender, and willowy silhouette. A courtier's body built for the dance and the saddle, not the muddy, bloody pit of a wrestling match. The ideal knight, as described in the romances, had long, straight legs, a flat stomach, and a waist that was small enough to embrace, suggesting a lithe, almost androgynous grace. His chest was not a barrel, but a smooth, broad plane, and his shoulders were wide, but sloping. His hands were long-fingered and pale, the hands of a lute player or a scribe, not the calloused paws of a manual laborer. His face was a study in fair and noble proportions. A high, smooth forehead, a straight and finely chiseled nose, a well-shaped mouth that was neither too thick nor too thin, and a strong, clean-shaven chin. The chin, indeed, was a critical point. A beard was a mark of age, wisdom, and sometimes of the wandering hermit or the penitent. But the fashionable young courtier, the beau of the tournament, presented a face as smooth as a boy's, a fleshly mirror of his purity and his eternal, unchanging youth. His hair, too, was a source of immense vanity. It fell in long, carefully combed ringlets to his shoulders, often bleached to the same golden russet hue so prized in women, framing a face that was always serene, its expression a controlled mask of noble melancholy, as if the beautiful night carried a gentle, unnameable sorrow, a longing for a distant, perfect love. The clothes that draped this ideal body were the final, magnificent stanzas of the beauty poem. The silhouette was one of sweeping, elongated grace, achieved through a mastery of vertical line. For the woman, the gown was a column, its fullness controlled by the fall of a surcoat that was often open at the sides, revealing a tightly laced underdress. The emphasis was on length and flow, a line that pulled the eye up towards the serene face, and then down to the tips of the pointed shoes that peeped from beneath the hem, shoes so long that their points were sometimes tied to the knee with silver chains to prevent tripping. The fabric itself was a text of wealth and beauty. The shimmer of silk from the Far East, the deep, mellow pile of velvet from Italian looms, the cool, crisp whisper of the finest linen from Rheims. Colors were a feast for the eye, deep and saturated with symbolism. The brilliant, costly scarlet of the dye made from crushed kermes insects was the badge of power. The celestial blue of the Virgin's robe, made from the ground lapis lazuli stone that cost more than gold, was a pigment of divine beauty, translated into cloth with the imported indigo or the local woad, a gown of lustrous forest green spoke of youth and new love, while a deep, rich black, a very difficult and expensive color to achieve, signaled solemn dignity and wealth. The surface of these fabrics was alive with texture. Gold threads wrapped around a silk core, catching the candlelight. The soft, warm belly fur of a squirrel, called vair, stitched into soft, gray and white linings. The pearl-encrusted embroidery that covered a bodice in a lattice of shimmering dew. To wear such clothes was to inhabit beauty, to become a walking work of art, a spectacle of piety and position. Sumptuary laws, passed by nervous kings, desperately tried to draw lines in the sand, decreeing that only the wife of a knight with lands worth a certain sum could wear the velvet, that the burgher's daughter was forbidden the train, that the peasant woman must stay in her coarse wool of undyed browns and grays. Beauty was a hierarchy, a visible, wearable order of being. As dusk deepens outside our imaginative window, and the embers in the hearth glow a soft, pulsing red, the concept of beauty in the medieval world seems to float before us, a perfect, miniature portrait in an illuminated manuscript. It was a beauty of harmony and hierarchy, of the symbol over the individual, of the soul made manifest. It was a beauty that could be smelled the drifting scent of lavender rosewater clinging to a lady's veil, the clean animal musk of leather and horse on a knight's cloak. It was a beauty that could be heard the lyrical praise of a love sonnet, the whisper of silk slippers on a stone floor, the gentle chime of a golden girdle, and it was a beauty that you felt in the soft coolness of a white linen chemise against the skin, in the weight of a jeweled collar, in the smooth, warm wood of a polished hand mirror. It was a world away from our own, a world where the flicker of a candle made every face a mystery of light and shadow, and where the highest compliment was to be a clear mirror of God's own light. Let the sounds of this world grow softer now, the lute player's song fading to a distant memory, the rustle of the silk gown replaced by the quiet crackle of the dying fire, the ideal of the high forehead, the rosebud mouth, the lily-white hand, the golden rivers of hair, the elegant, elongated male form. These are not just the fancies of a forgotten age. They are the whispers of our ancestors, telling us that beauty is never just a physical fact. It is a story we tell ourselves about order, about goodness, about what it means to be human. As you rest, let the image of that young woman at the well, or that lady in her solar, be a gentle, sleeping fresco in your mind, a portrait of a time when beauty was a quiet, disciplined, and deeply symbolic dream. The dream is yours to revisit whenever you wish to walk the stone hallways of the past. The first chapter of our long, quiet story through the medieval garden of beauty has drawn to a close. The next time we meet, the veil will lift again, and we will wander deeper into the secrets of the bathhouse, the hidden language of the bestiary that shaped the ideal of the lover, and the profound, aching beauty of a saint who has renounced the world. For now, sleep well, and let the stillness of the Middle Ages hold you in its gentle, moonlit hand. The steam rises in a soft, curling veil, mingling with the scent of wood smoke and crushed herbs. You are no longer in the cold stone solar of the castle, but in a place that hums with a different kind of quiet. This is the bathhouse, a warm, dimly lit sanctuary on the edge of a bustling medieval town, a place where the boundaries of the body and the soul are gently, temporarily dissolved in water and vapor. The world outside, with its rigid hierarchies and its stern moral watchmen, seems to pause at the heavy oaken door. Here, the language of beauty is spoken in the intimate dialect of water, oil, and the soft, scrubbing touch of a linen cloth on skin. The medieval bath was a ritual far removed from our hurried, solitary showers. It was a communal act, a slow, deliberate sinking into a world of sensation. The bathhouse keeper, often a woman with strong, capable arms, and a knowledge of herbs passed down through generations, stokes the fire beneath a great copper cauldron. The water, drawn from a well and heated to a gentle, embracing warmth, is poured into large, round wooden tubs. each lined with a sheet of clean linen to protect the bather from splinters. The air is thick and drowsy, with the scent of the plants that have been steeped in the water. There is lavender, of course, its calming, floral cloud a balm for tired muscles and anxious thoughts. There is rosemary, the herb of remembrance, which sharpens the mind even as it cleanses the scalp. Sage, with its earthy, purifying tang, is added to drive away the dank humors that were thought to bring sickness. And for the truly noble lady, a fortune of rose petals, dried and stored from the summer, swirls on the surface of the water, their fragrance a silent poem of luxury. To be clean was to be beautiful. But the medieval concept of cleanliness was not about the annihilation of all scent. It was about balance, about presenting a body whose natural odors were sweet and wholesome, not rank with the stale sweat of labor or neglect. A beautiful body smelled not of nothing, but of the garden. The skin was rubbed with sweet-smelling oils of almond and violet, the breath sweetened with anise and clove, the clothes kept in chests scented with the roots of the orris plant, which smelled of violets long after it was dried. This olfactory landscape was a crucial, invisible component of the medieval ideal. A person who stank was a person in a state of spiritual or physical disorder. The leper, the beggar, the unwashed penitent, their stench was a mark of their social and moral distance. The beautiful soul, the courtly lover, the saint in her cell, they were imagined to exude an odor of sanctity, a miraculous floral fragrance that emanated from their very flesh, a scent of paradise itself. The hands that work the bather's body are not idle. The scrubbing is the centerpiece of the ritual. Using a coarse cloth and a paste of ground grain and honey, the attendant works the skin to a rosy, glowing pink. This is not a painless procedure. It is a cleansing that strips away the old, dead surface to reveal the fresh, luminous new skin beneath. A skin as smooth as alabaster, the perfect canvas for the ideal complexion. This process, a kind of dermabrasion of the age, was the physical counterpart to the spiritual confession, just as the soul was scrubbed clean of sin through penance. So the body was scrubbed clean of its physical imperfections. The hair, unbound from its daytime braids, is washed with a special soap made from wood ash and goat fat, then rinsed with a sharp-smelling herbal water to make it gleam. The lady might lie back, her golden hair floating around her like a halo of spun silk on the water, while a maid carefully combs through it, the smooth ivory teeth of the comb passing through the strands with a soft, rhythmic whisper, removing any lingering tangles, any tiny, earthly imperfections. Yet this sensual world of the bathhouse walked a perilous tightrope. The church viewed the public baths with a deeply suspicious eye, and not without reason in their worldview. The intimate, steamy, and often semi-clothed gatherings of men and women, though many bathhouses had separate days or sections, were a constant source of anxiety for the moralists. They were seen as a threshold of temptation, a place where the devil's workshop hummed with particular industry. To paint one's face was to deface God's image. To indulge overmuch in the pleasures of the warm, scented water was to invite the sins of the flesh, the sin of luxuria. The bath was a mirror of the medieval beauty paradox itself, a place of profound purity and profound peril. The very waters that cleansed the body could, in the eyes of a preacher, contaminate the soul. And yet, the bathing continued. The desire for the lily-white skin, the sweet-smelling hair, the relaxed and graceful body was a force stronger than the thundering of many a sermon. Let the steam clear now, and let us move from the intimate warmth of the bathhouse to the cool, vellum-smooth pages of a bestiary, a book of beasts, illuminated in gold leaf and powdered lapis. The beauty of the medieval human was not seen in isolation. It was understood through the grand, divine tapestry of nature. The qualities of a beautiful face or a noble form were reflected in the animal world, each creature a living, breathing symbol of a virtue or a vice, a moral or an aesthetic attribute. The ideal lover, as sung by the troubadour, was often painted with a brush dipped in the ink of the bestiary. His eyes were to be sharp and fearless, like the falcon's, a bird of nobility and piercing vision, who could gaze unblinking at the sun. A beautiful lady's neck was not simply long and pale. It was the neck of a swan, the graceful alabaster curve that moved with an unthinking, regal serenity. Her fair skin and golden hair made her a human ermine. That small, snow-white weasel that legend held would rather die than soil its pure white fur, thus becoming an emblem of spotless chastity. The symbolism ran deeper still, into the very architecture of the body. A beautiful woman's teeth should be like little dogs, small and white, and evenly set, ready to bite, perhaps, but for now, demurely hidden behind a rosebud mouth. Her breasts, if ever truly described in the chaste poetry of the court, were like two fawns, gentle and small and round, or like pomegranates, symbols of secret, seeded fertility. A knight's strength and courage were that of the lion, his mane of long, tawny hair a golden corona of valor. But his grace, his quick, elegant movement on the dance floor or in the lists, was the swift, silent beauty of the stag, the heart that pants for the water brooks, a body that is an offering of pure, unblemished vitality. The act of hunting, with its elaborate rituals of unmaking the stag, was a profoundly aesthetic and symbolic act, a dance of death and beauty that mirrored the courtier's own body, which was itself to be a perfectly ordered, disciplined, and noble creature. To be called lion-hearted or swan-necked was the highest form of physical flattery. You were not just beautiful, you were a perfect, living microcosm of God's beautifully ordered creation, a creature in whom the best qualities of the natural world were concentrated. From this symbolic menagerie, the gaze of the medieval world turns slowly, inevitably, towards the ultimate archetype of beauty, a beauty so powerful it did not fade, but grew more luminous as the body itself was starved, neglected, or martyred. This is the aching beauty of the saint. Step into the cold, stone quiet of an anchoress's cell, a tiny room attached to a church, its only opening a small window that looks onto the altar and a squint on the world, through which she might counsel visitors. The woman who has chosen this life to be walled in for the rest of her earthly days is engaged in a radical, breathtaking act of aesthetic transfiguration. She is renouncing the beauty of the world, the flowing golden hair, the silk gowns, the scent of the rose garden, to become a vessel for a beauty that is not of this world. Her high forehead is no longer plucked for vanity, but is a pale, bare slate of contemplation. Her skin, wasted and thin from fasting, is not the rosy bloom of health, but a translucent parchment through which the holy light of her soul is said to softly glow. Her eyes, sunken and dark-rimmed from vigils of prayer, are not dimmed, but are described as burning with a fierce, inward fire, the divine flame of a bride of Christ. The medieval hagiographies, the lives of the saints, are filled with a strange and unsettling aesthetic of suffering. The beauty of Saint Catherine, before her brutal torture on the wheel, was a worldly beauty that drew princes to her wisdom, but her true, eternal beauty was revealed in her martyrdom, in her unbroken spirit, in the moment her blood, the red of the perfect rose, was spilled. The beauty of Saint Lucy, who is said to have gouged out her own beautiful eyes to dissuade a suitor, is a terrifying beauty of absolute bodily sacrifice. In the paintings and sculptures, she is often shown serenely offering her own eyes on a plate, a gesture of sublime, horrifying poetry. Her true beauty is then restored by God, who gives her new, even more beautiful eyes, not of this world. The wounds of Saint Francis, the stigmata that mirrored Christ's own, were seen as a supernatural beauty, the final, perfect adornment of a life lived in total imitation. The twisted, impoverished, and suffering body was, in this reversed logic of sanctity, a beautiful body, because it was the closest possible earthly copy of the body of the suffering Christ, the man of sorrows, whose own tortured form was the very image of redemptive love. This aesthetic of holy negation was the ultimate counterpoint to the high forehead and the rosebud mouth. It proclaimed that all earthly standards, the pale skin, the golden hair, the slender waist of the night, were but shadows and fleeting vapors. A young anchoress, barely more than a girl, named Julian of Norwich, closed in her cell, sought not the beauty of a courtly romance, but a direct bodily vision of Christ's passion. she prayed for a bodily sight of his suffering, and when she received it, the blood trickling down from the crown of thorns was not grotesque to her, but beautiful, a life-giving rain. The figure of the Virgin Mary, however, held both worlds in perfect, impossible balance. She was the Queen of Heaven, arrayed in that expensive, celestial blue, the most beautiful woman who ever lived. As the theologians taught, her physical perfection a necessary vessel for the incarnation of God. But she was also the handmaid of the Lord, a model of humility. Her beauty never described in Scripture as a temptation, but as a pure, serene, and fruitful grace. She was the only woman who could be simultaneously the flawless beauty of the courtly ideal and the veiled, selfless saint. She was, in every way that mattered, the conclusion of the conversation, the still, quiet point around which all the contradictions of medieval beauty turned. As you sink deeper into your own quiet repose, let the images drift and mingle in the soft haze of memory. The steamy warmth of the bathhouse and the cold, holy cell are not opposites, but two chambers of the same heart, the same hand that plucked the high, ivory forehead also tremblingly touched the relic of a saint's bone, the same eye that admired the falcon's fierce clarity in a lover's face also wept at the thought of Christ's torn, beautiful flesh. Medieval beauty was a vast, echoing cathedral, its architecture built on the tension between the earthly garden and the heavenly city. The golden hair, the swan-like neck, the scrubbed pink skin, the sweet-scented breath, they were all prayers in their own way, a longing for an incorruptible crown. Rest now, and let these quiet stories of water, animals, and saints be the gentle lullaby that carries you through the night. The story of this ancient, dreaming world is not finished. When you are ready, we shall wander next into the secret garden of courtly love, where beauty is a game of chess played for the highest stakes of all. The gate is made of wrought iron, its black tendrils twisted into the shapes of climbing roses. Each iron leaf and thorn so finely wrought that it seems to tremble in the soft air. Beyond it lies the garden, a walled paradise that exists not merely in the physical world, but in the deepest strata of the medieval imagination. It is the asterisk Hortus Conclusus asterisk, the enclosed garden, the secret sanctuary, where the most intricate and beautiful of all medieval games is played. The game of courtly love. As you step through the gate in the quiet of this drowsy hour, the sounds of the outside world fall away entirely. The clatter of hooves, the cry of the street vendor, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, all are replaced by the gentle, hypnotic music of a fountain playing over smooth stones, the low hum of bees heavy with pollen, and the whispered rustle of a lover's silk sleeve against a hedge of fragrant lavender. This garden is an architecture of the soul. Every path and flower bed a verse in an unending poem of desire and devotion. The grass is a carpet of emerald velvet, studded with the tiny white stars of daisies. A flower so beloved that it was woven into the crowns of maidens on May Day. The flower beds are raised, bordered with woven willow, a delicate lattice that keeps the sacred order of the garden intact. Here, the medieval eye could read a living bestiary of floral symbolism. The pure white lily stands tall and proud, its scent a heavy, intoxicating cloud, a symbol of the Virgin's own purity, a silent trumpet announcing a beauty that is untouched. The red rose, of course, is the queen of this enclosed world, its velvet petals unfurling in the sun, a crimson chalice of love and passion, but also of the thorns of suffering that must prick the lover who dares to pluck it. The violet, humble and low to the ground, its small, deep purple face hidden beneath heart-shaped leaves, is the emblem of humility and faithfulness, the quiet, unassuming virtue that the proud lover must learn. Even the herbs, the rosemary for remembrance, the sage for wisdom, the sweet marjoram for joy, are planted not just for their use in the kitchen or the still room, but for their silent, scented counsel on the journey of love. The lady of this garden sits upon a low, turf-covered bench, a seat of living grass and thyme that releases a cloud of sharp, sweet fragrance when she moves. In her lap is a book, not a heavy, chained theological tome, but a book of hours, its vellum pages glowing with miniature paintings of lovers in gardens just like this one. Her gown is the color of the spring sky, a soft, faded blue, and her hair, that glorious, forbidden river of gold, is unbound and flowing over her shoulders. For she is a maiden, a asterisk domna asterisk, the sovereign of this small, perfect universe. The beauty of this lady is not a passive thing. It is a force, a power that radiates from her like the heat from the sun. Her high, plucked forehead is a white, unblemished dome. Her eyes are the clear, luminous gray of a calm sea, and her lips are the exact, maddening shade of the rose she absently twirls in her long, slender fingers. The scene is a portrait of perfect, static grace, but it is a tableau that exists only to be disrupted, to be set into motion by the arrival of the lover. The lover enters the garden not with a casual step, but with the formal, almost liturgical approach of a supplicant approaching a shrine. He is a young knight, clad in a simple tunic of deep green wool, for he comes not as a warrior in the noise of his armor, but with a quiet vulnerability. His hair is the golden brown of a lion's mane, his face clean-shaven, his posture a study in respectful deference. The game of courtly love, or Finammer, as it was sung in the lyrical tongue of the troubadours, was not a chaotic, emotional free-for-all. It was a highly structured, exquisitely refined dance, a sort of chess played with glances and sighs, where every move, every gesture, was charged with meaning. The code was as rigid and demanding as the code of chivalry itself. its ultimate goal was not the crude satisfaction of a base appetite, but the spiritual elevation and moral refinement of the lover. The beautiful lady was not a passive object to be won. She was the lord, the Midon's asterisk, and the lover her vassal. He knelt before her, placed his joined hands in hers, and swore an oath of fealty, just as a knight would to his king. He pledged his heart, his sword, his song, all dedicated to the pure glory of her beauty and the virtue it reflected. The physical symptoms of this love were themselves a kind of script, a beautiful sickness. The lover was expected to tremble in her presence, to grow pale, to lose his power of speech, to sigh so deeply that the very core of his being seemed to escape his lips. His inability to sleep, his loss of appetite, the way his eyes would well with sudden, inexplicable tears at the mere memory of her smile. These were not signs of weakness, but the hallmarks of a true and refined passion. This was the malady of love, a noble affliction described in the medical texts of the time as a genuine physiological condition, a heating of the humors around the heart that caused a kind of sweet, wasting melancholy. The beautiful lady, in this grand aesthetic scheme, was the physician, and the poison all in one. A single, merciful glance from her brilliant eyes could restore his health and fill him with a joy so intense it was almost unbearable. A cold, dismissive turn of her swan-like neck could plunge him into a despair that mimicked death itself. The entire drama was a theater of exquisite suffering, and its stage was the body of the lover. And then there was the song. No account of medieval beauty can be complete without the music that gave it its most durable form. The troubadour, the trover asterisk, the asterisk Minnesänger asterisk. These poet-musicians were the high priests of the cult of beauty, wandering from the castle of Aquitaine to the courts of the Holy Roman Empire, a viol on their back and a new asterisk canso on their lips. Their songs were intricate tapestries of sound and word, weaving the beauty of the beloved into the beauty of the season, the beauty of the dawn, the beauty of a small, singing bird in a typical alba asterisk or dawn song. A watchman's cry warned the secret lovers that the night had ended, and the lyrics were a bittersweet lament against the cruel, beautiful light of the rising sun that forced them to part. The beloved's body was not described in graphic detail, but in a shimmering, metaphorical code of precious materials and remote, idealized objects. Her skin was not just pale, it was fresher than the snow on the branch. Her cheeks were not just pink, they were the rose newly blown. Her eyes were not just bright, they were two emeralds shining in the night. Or, in a more Christianized image, the windows of heaven through which the light of God streams into my soul. This was the aesthetic of the blazon asterisk, a poetic catalog of the beloved's perfect parts. a verbal dissection that was meant not to be morbid, but to create an icon of perfection, a composite image of the ideal that transcended any single, flawed mortal woman. The lady of the song was less a person than a philosophy of beauty made into a melody, the ultimate object of the lover's quest. The goal of this elaborate game of chess was not a physical consummation in the modern sense, but the drut asterisk, a complex concept of intimate reward that ranged from a single, solemn kiss to the highest, most sublime gift. The Versailles asterisk, the testing. This was the moment when the lady might grant her lover the profound privilege of beholding her naked beauty, not to touch, but simply to look, to gaze upon her form as a sacred mystery. This was the very apotheosis of the visual in the medieval aesthetic. The lover was to lie beside her in the great curtained bed, the castle silent around them, the only light a single candle, and simply to contemplate, with a reverence bordering on worship, the unadorned perfection of the body he had so long praised from afar. The long, golden hair would be spread around her like a mantle of silk. The skin, unblemished and white as milk, would reflect the soft light. The form, with its softly rounded belly, its small, high breasts, its long, straight legs, was a landscape of perfection. This was a gaze of absolute chastity, an act of aesthetic adoration so pure that it elevated the soul. But it was also, of course, a tightrope walk over an abyss of temptation. It was the most beautiful and the most dangerous moment in the secret script of courtly love. The stories are littered with the ruins of knights who failed the test, who moved from a contemplative gaze to a grasping hand, and in so doing, shattered the delicate, beautiful illusion forever. Yet the beauty of the courtly ideal was always a beauty held in a precarious tension, a golden chalice balanced on the edge of a sword. The same church that provided the language of veneration for the beloved also thundered against the sin of idolatry. Was the lover worshiping God's perfect creation, or was he worshiping a creature in place of the Creator? The preachers of the time were not blind to the erotic subtext of the Hortus Conclusus asterisk. They saw in the enclosed garden not the pure realm of spiritual refinement, but a parody of the Garden of Eden, a place of primal disobedience where the serpent coiled under the perfumed leaves of the rose. The very unattainability that was the engine of the courtly ideal, the fact that the beloved was often, and most perfectly, the wife of another man, a lord to whom the lover owed loyalty, made the entire structure a beautiful, blasphemous edifice built on sand. This tension was the source of its immense literary power. The same hand that illuminated a prayer book with a Madonna of serene and spotless beauty might, in a different corner of the scriptorium, paint a miniature of Tristan and Isolde drinking the fatal love potion, a scene of illicit, irresistible passion. beautiful face of the courtly lady and the beautiful face of the virgin were, in a profound and unsettling way, two versions of the same aesthetic ideal, one oriented towards the earthly garden, the other towards the heavenly city. The ability to distinguish between them, to channel desire towards the sacred and away from the profane, was the great, silent spiritual battle fought beneath the serene surface of every beautiful face and every perfect rose. Slowly, the light in the walled garden begins to change. The sun, which had been a warm, golden benediction, begins to slant at a sharper, more melancholic angle. The shadows of the fruit trees grow long and distorted, and a single, late-blooming rose drops its petals onto the velvet grass. A silent, visual sigh. The lady has departed, and the lover, his song unfinished, is left alone with the scent of her absence. The gate of the garden does not merely close on this small, private world. It begins to open onto a wider, more public stage, where beauty is not a private game between two souls, but a communal, spectacular performance. The stage is the tournament field. The tournament was the grand, violent ballet of the medieval world, and it was, above all, a pageant of beauty. It was a place where the aesthetics of the male body, the chivalric ideal, and the chaste desire of the courtly lady all collided in a carefully orchestrated explosion of color, sound, and controlled danger. Picture the field on a bright, crisp morning, the stands crowded with the nobility, a living tapestry of heraldic colors, the ladies, the gallery of the dames' parées, sit elevated, their bright silks and jeweled headdresses creating a shimmering border of approval or disdain. They are the judges of the day, the dispensers of glory, for the entire bloody, bruising spectacle is offered in their honor. A knight rides into the lists, not merely to display his prowess in arms, but to make his body a public offering to the beauty of his chosen lady. His armor itself is a work of aesthetic devotion. The polished steel is not a dull, functional gray, but a mirror that flashes in the sun, often chased with gold and silver. His helmet is crested with a fantastic heraldic beast, a swan with wings outspread, a dragon breathing painted flames, a golden lion holding a rose in its paw. His shield is painted with his arms, a complex code of colors and symbols that tells the story of his lineage. The very horse he rides is a magnificent creature, a destrier draped in a caparison, a silk and velvet blanket that reaches almost to the ground, emblazoned with his master's heraldry. The mass of horse and rider becomes a single, thundering, and utterly magnificent visual unit, a moving sculpture of power and grace. The beauty of the knight's body in motion was the center of the spectacle. He was to be a figure of controlled, explosive energy. The way he couched his lance under his arm, its long, tapering ash shaft painted in spiral bands of color, was a pose of sculptural balance. The moment of impact, when lance met shield or helm, was a brutal, beautiful shattering, a splintering of wood that was greeted by a collective gasp from the crowd, a sound that was half horror and half awe. But the true aesthetic triumph was in the rider who remained seated, whose body, in its cage of steel, moved as a single, fluid unit with the animal beneath him. He was to be a centaur, a being of fused, instinctual grace. When he dismounted and removed his helm, the contrast was the final, crucial stanza of the performance. The shiny, hard, threatening, masculine carapace of steel was unclasped to reveal the pale, serene, almost feminine beauty of the courtly face beneath, the high forehead damp with a sheen of noble sweat, the long golden hair now plastered to the temples, the gaze modest despite the roar of the crowd. This was the ultimate synthesis of the medieval masculine ideal. The lion's strength united with the stag's grace, the hardness of the warrior seamlessly integrated with the softness of the lover. If the knight was the victor, the final act of the tournament pageant was the awarding of the prize by the Queen of Love and Beauty. She would descend from her throne in the stands, a figure of unearthly loveliness in a gown of cloth of gold, and present him with a helmet full of gold coins, a jeweled sword, or perhaps a delicate, personal token, a sleeve of her own dress, which he would tie to his lance, a ribbon of silk that had lain against her skin. But the true prize was not the physical object. It was the public acknowledgement of the link between his beautiful valor and her beautiful, inspiring presence. This was the aesthetic of chivalry made manifest. A closed loop of male performance and female reward that reinforced the entire social and erotic order. The blood, the mud, the broken bones of the melee were all washed clean by this final, glittering ritual, transforming the chaotic violence of the sport into a beautiful, moral allegory of service and devotion. But as the fanfares fade and the pennants are lowered, a new sound begins to drift across the landscape of our sleeping story. It is a sound that is at first faint, a distant, rhythmic creaking, a mournful, echoing melody. The light shifts again, from the bright gaiety of the tournament field to a more somber, crepuscular palette of grays, browns, and shadowed golds. The 14th century has arrived, and it carries on its back a heavy, invisible cargo of change, the great cycle of medieval beauty, the static, idealized world of the lily and the rose, the enclosed garden and the unblemished skin, is beginning to feel the first cold draft of a new and anxious air. The population is growing. Trade is bringing strange, exotic luxuries from the East, and the rigid, sumptuary laws, which once tried to pin beauty to a fixed social station, are being flouted with increasing audacity. The merchant's wife, rich from the wool trade, dares to wear a gown of velvet with a train, the very symbol of noble idleness. The young, fashionable squire wears shoes with points so long they curl into ram's horns, a style condemned as devil's claws, but adopted with a feverish, competitive zeal. Beauty is becoming a field of anxious imitation and rapid, fickle change. And then, the cold wind becomes an icy, suffocating blast. The sound that was a distant creaking is now unmistakable. It is the asterisk dance macabre, the dance of death. In the middle of the 14th century, a horror sweeps across the known world, a formless, invisible terror that turns the entire logic of beauty on its head. The Black Death does not merely kill, it decomposes the very idea of the body beautiful. How can one sing of a lady's skin as fresher than the snow on the branch, when the skin itself can blacken with buboes, mottle with purple hemorrhages, and slew away in a matter of hours? The plague was the ultimate anti-beauty, an aesthetic catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. It was the worm in the rose, the grinning skull beneath the serene high forehead, a reality so brutal it shattered the polished, idealized mirrors of the previous centuries. The artistic response was not to retreat from beauty, but to create a new, terrible, and mesmerizing aesthetic of mortality. The asterisk dance macabre, painted on the walls of churchyards and cloisters, was a procession of the living, arranged in strict hierarchical order, from the Pope and the Emperor down to the peasant and the child. Each living figure, clad in the beautiful robes of their estate, was partnered with a capering, gleeful corpse, a skeleton that grinned back with a hideous parody of a smile. The beautiful body of the emperor, with its ermine robe and golden crown, is led by a corpse that is its exact, ghastly double, a mirror that shows not the smooth, polished surface, but the bare, rattling frame beneath. The beautiful lady of the court, with her high forehead and her golden hair, is partnered by a skeleton that mocks her vanity with a mirror that reflects only dust. This was a beauty of warning, a asterisk memento mori asterisk, a reminder that all earthly loveliness was alone, a flower that must wither in the winter of the grave, the aesthetic of the transitum, a sculpture that showed the great prince or prelate not as a serene, idealized effigy in his robes of state, but as a decaying, emaciated corpse lying directly below, a body in the very process of being eaten by worms and toads, was the ultimate expression of this new, macabre spirituality. This was a world that had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had become a part of its vision of beauty. And so, as the soft, vespertine shadows of our third chapter deepen, the medieval ideal of beauty stands at a crossroads. The walled garden is still there, the fountain still plays, but its walls are now more fragile, its blossoms more poignant for their brevity. The tournament field is silent, and the bright pennants hang limp in the still, cold air. The face of the beautiful lady, the one with the lily-white skin and the rosebud mouth, now holds a hint of a sadness that was not there before, a knowledge that the skull is waiting just beneath the lovely, luminous surface. The ideal has not been destroyed, but it has been deepened, made more human, and infinitely more precious by the shadow of the great mortality that fell across the land. The story of beauty in the medieval world is entering its long, golden autumn, a season of intricate fashions, of luxury traded for life, of a desperate, magnificent clinging to the splendor of the world in the face of its inevitable end. A single skeletal hand, the bone fingers articulated with a terrible delicacy, has paused mid-gesture, frozen in the cold air of the ossuary. The asterisk dance macabre that began with the wail of the plague has not ceased, but its rhythm has changed, slowed into a more stately, almost courtly measure. The world, having stared into the grinning face of its own annihilation, has not turned away from beauty in horror and despair. It has instead, with a feverish, almost defiant passion, clutched beauty closer. The 14th century fades into the 15th, like a bruised and dying sunset, giving way to the strange, phosphorescent glow of a moonlit winter night. This is the autumn of the Middle Ages, a season of extravagant decay, a hothouse of aesthetic excess, where every gesture, every garment, every carefully painted face is a bright, brittle leaf clinging to a branch that has already begun to die. Imagine, if you will, not the dusty tournament field of a provincial lord, but the glittering, polyglot court of the Duchy of Burgundy. The air is thick with the scent of expensive wax from 1,000 candles, of ambergris and musk, of the heavy, wine-dark perfume of crushed carnations. It is a world of such concentrated splendor that it seems to exist not in the realm of the real, but in the pages of an illuminated manuscript, each scene a miniature of jewel-like intensity. The beauty on display here is not the quiet, unadorned grace of the early maiden at the well, nor the serene, spiritualized elegance of the courtly lady in her garden. This is a beauty of proclamation, a loud, insistent, and breathtakingly intricate visual shout. It is a beauty of the Hotel Asterisk, the noble household as a theatrical stage, where the body of the lord and lady are the sacred relics of a fading chivalric dream, encased in reliquaries of silk, fur, and gold. The female silhouette, once a soft, columnar cascade of wool and linen, has undergone a radical architectural transformation. It has become a Gothic cathedral in miniature. The foundation of this new ideal is not the natural body, but a rigid, artificial carapace. The waist, that gentle swell of fertility, is compressed, flattened, and pushed upward by a stiffened bodice, a precursor to the corset, made of layers of thick linen buckram, stitched with whalebone or willow reeds. The goal is not an hourglass, but a smooth, inverted cone, a flat plane that rises directly under the bust, pushing the breasts, now ideally small, round, and widely separated like two apples on a silver platter, unnaturally high. The dress itself, the houppelande, is a cascade of voluminous luxury. It falls from this high, compressed bodice in deep, tubular folds, its hem pooling in a vast, heavy circle on the floor. The fabric is no longer a simple, local wool. It is an Italian voided velvet, its pile sheared to create a pattern of gold thread on a ground of deepest crimson, or a silk brocade woven in the Levant with the motif of a phoenix, the mythical bird that rises from ashes, a symbol that has taken on a new, desperate resonance in the age of the plague. The sleeves are a particular focal point of beauty. They are immense, sweeping, and lined with the most forbidden and luxurious of furs, not the humble squirrel, but the winter-white belly fur of the ermine, its pure surface punctuated by the black tips of the tails. A fur so noble that sumptuary laws reserved it for the highest ranks of royalty. A lady's hand, pale, long-fingered, and adorned with rings of sapphire and ruby, peeps from the vast opening of this fur-lined funnel, looking like a tiny, precious creature emerging from a cave of silk, but the true architectural wonder. The soaring steeple of this Gothic cathedral of the body is the headdress, the simple veil and wimple of the married woman. The plaited ram's horns of coiled hair have been swept away by a fantastic, vertiginous creation. It is the asterisk hennin asterisk, the tall, conical hat that rises to a dizzying height, sometimes over 2 feet above the wearer's brow. It is made of starched linen or a thin, stiffened card covered in silk, and from its pointed tip trails a diaphanous veil, a cloud of the finest silk gauze, sometimes so long it reaches the floor. The hennin asterisk does not merely cover the hair. It completes an act of erasure that has been central to the medieval beauty ideal for centuries. To achieve the perfect, domed sweep beneath this towering structure, the hairline is plucked back even more mercilessly than before. The eyebrows are plucked to the thinnest of thread-like arches, or removed entirely, and even the hair at the nape of the neck is shaved. The face becomes a completely detached, perfect oval, a pale, luminous mask of flesh that floats above the rich, encrusted collar of the gown, like a moon sailing above a jeweled landscape. This is the ultimate triumph of the high forehead, a forehead that has now conquered the entire face, a smooth, blank parchment upon which the beauty of modesty and nobility is written in invisible ink. The fashion for this ethereal, otherworldly paleness has been intensified, given a new and morbid gloss by the long shadow of the plague. The beautiful face is no longer just the healthy, lily-white complexion of the maiden who stays out of the sun. It is the translucent, almost cadaverous pallor of the consumptive, the thin, blue-veined skin of the cloistered mystic who lives on nothing but the host, The faint blue tint of the veins at the temple is a cherished detail, a subtle sign of a skin so fine and delicate that the very rivers of the body are visible beneath its surface. This is the aesthetic of the asterisk malady asterisk, the beautiful sickness taken to its logical extreme. The lady of fashion does not wish to look robust and fertile. She wishes to look fragile, ethereal, a soul already half in heaven, a being whose beauty is a kind of exquisite, ongoing death. And so, the paints and potions that were once applied in secret, with a fear of the priest's condemnation, begin to be used with a more open, almost defiant artifice. The ceruse, the white lead paste, is applied thickly to achieve that flawless, spectral mask. Despite the knowledge of its slow, corrosive poison, the lips are painted, not the full, natural rose of the earlier age, but a tiny, stylized crimson bud right in the very center of the mouth. A single, perfect berry on a field of snow. The cheeks are sparingly touched with a dry rouge made from ground red sandalwood, applied in a perfect circle, not to mimic a natural blush, but to look like a painted doll, a work of art, the male counterpart to this ostentatious, vertical beauty is no less a walking spectacle. The slender, clean-shaven youth of the high medieval court has not vanished, but his silhouette has hardened and sharpened into something more angular and aggressive. The ideal male body, as seen in the portraits of a Van Eyck or a Van der Weyden, is a study in taut, nervous energy, a body encased in the secular armor of fashion. The doublet, a tight-fitting jacket, is padded and shaped over the chest and shoulders to create a silhouette that is broad and imposing above a waist that is as tightly cinched as a lady S. The chest, padded with cotton wadding, swells out like the breast of a pouter pigeon, a martial and masculine curve. The shoulders are broadened with padded sleeves, creating a sharp, almost square line from which the arms descend. The legs, the great focal point of male beauty in this age, are encased in skin-tight asterisk, hose asterisk, individual stockings of fine wool or silk, often party-colored. One leg a brilliant scarlet, the other a deep sky blue. The asterisk hose are laced to the doublet and are so tight they reveal every muscle and sinew of the leg, from the curve of the calf to the hard line of the thigh. To be considered a beautiful man, one had to possess elegant, straight, and shapely legs, and the display of them was a constant, unapologetic part of male fashion. The codpiece, that most peculiar of sartorial inventions, begins its slow, inexorable journey from a simple triangular flap of fabric to a padded, exaggerated, and assertive statement of masculine virility. And the shoes, the asterisk poulines or asterisk krakows, the shoes with the long, pointed toes, reach their zenith of impractical, beautiful absurdity. The toe is stuffed with moss or horsehair and can extend a full 2 feet or more beyond the natural foot, curling up like a ram's horn or a scorpion's tail. To walk in these shoes is an art, a delicate, swaying shuffle that forces the body into a posture of mincing, courtly grace. They are often fastened with a fine gold chain to a garter just below the knee to prevent tripping. The pooling is the perfect symbol of this late medieval aesthetic. A useless, expensive, structurally insane elongation of the natural body into a purely artificial and symbolic realm. It is a piece of clothing that makes manual labor an impossibility, a declaration that its wearer's body has transcended the base, physical world, and now exists solely on the gilded plane of ceremony and display. The churchmen, of course, preach against them as devil's claws, a sin of pride that mock God's creation. But the courtly world is too deep in its game of aesthetic competition to listen. The length of one's shoe is a direct index of one's status, a phallic and social measure of power. This entire gorgeous and fragile edifice of late medieval beauty is a fortress built against a tide of profound anxiety. It is a collective, elaborate attempt to impose an artificial, aristocratic order on a world that has been revealed as chaotic, terrifying, and ephemeral. The asterisk dance macabre does not disappear. It is, in fact, painted directly onto the silk of a lady's dress. A little skeleton embroidered in silver thread, hiding in a corner of a sleeve. The asterisk memento mori asterisk is carved into the bezel of a ring. A tiny skull in ivory that touches the skin beneath a cluster of rubies. The beautiful body, so meticulously crafted and displayed, is a desperate, magnificent lie, a denial of the rot that waits within. This is the world captured with such crystalline precision in the paintings of the Flemish masters. Look at a portrait by Rogier van der Weyden, and you see not a real person, but a platonic ideal of aristocratic composure. The faces are elongated, the features refined to a geometric purity, the skin a flawless, luminous enamel. The expressions are one of controlled, noble melancholy, a gentle and refined sadness that is the hallmark of the beautiful soul. This is not a world of spontaneous joy. It is a world of ritual, of a beauty that is a conscious, strenuous performance of virtue, status, and an unearthly grace that is always tinged with the sweet sorrow of its own impermanence. The sumptuary laws in this late flowering become more frantic, more detailed, and more unenforceable than ever before. It is a legal, hysterical attempt to fix the boundaries of a beauty that is constantly slipping away from its prescribed social moorings. Parliaments and city councils across Europe issue edicts that read like desperate, encyclopedic catalogs of beauty and its abuses. A decree might state that no woman below the rank of a countess may wear a train longer than 2 palms, that no burgher's wife may line her hood with income of less than 1,000 livres a year may wear cloth of gold, that the points of a man's shoes must not exceed the length of his own foot. The very specificity of these laws is a testament to their futility. The merchant's wife, her chest full of gold florins from the cloth trade, looks at the silk brocade woven with golden pomegranates and feels the deep human ache of a beauty denied. She will buy it, and she will wear it within the privacy of her own great house, a delicious, secret act of rebellion. The young, fashionable squire will insert a new, longer pair of points into his asterisk poolings. As soon as he is out of the sheriff's sight, the beautiful body is becoming an individual's currency, a source of social capital that can be purchased. And the old, rigid, divinely ordained hierarchy is beginning to crack under its pressure. In the hushed, gilded interiors of the Flemish portraits, a new kind of consciousness is dawning in the eyes of the sitters. A woman stands by a window, her hand resting lightly on her gently swelling belly, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She is not an anonymous Madonna, not a mythical heroine from a chanson de geste. She is a specific person. Her name might be written in the records of a Bruges guild. Her face, though painted with the universalizing formulas of the beautiful ideal, the high, plucked forehead, the pale, smooth skin, the small, rosebud mouth, has the unmistakable architecture of an individual. The painting of a beauty is slowly, almost imperceptibly, becoming the portrait of a person. The idea that a beautiful face could be a window into a unique, unrepeatable soul, rather than merely a mirror of a divine type, is a seed that, in centuries to come, will blossom into the entire project of modern identity. But for now, it is still a medieval face, a face that understands itself as a transient, beautiful form, playing its part in the grand, cosmic drama before the final curtain falls. And yet, even in this rarefied air, the raw, physical facts of the body could not be entirely conquered by the art of the tailor and the cosmetician. A very different image of beauty was celebrated, not in the silks of the court, but in the coarse wool and healthy sweat of the peasant's world. The pastoral ideal, a convention going back to the classical world, found a new, vibrant life in the late medieval imagination. The shepherdess in the poem, the peasant girl dancing on the village green, was the beautiful, earthly counterpoint to the spectral lady of the court. Her skin was not the lead white of the hennin wearer, but the rosy, sun-kissed brown of a ripe pear. Her cheeks were not artfully dotted with sandalwood, but flushed with the genuine crimson heat of exercise and laughter. Her hair was not plucked into oblivion, but was a wild, tangled mane of dark curls, crowned with a simple wreath of meadow flowers. Her body was not compressed and elongated into an architectural spire, but was round, soft, and strong. A body made for work, for dancing, for bearing children with ease. This was the beauty of the pastoral romance. The pastourelle asterisk, a world where a knight might stumble upon a scene of bucolic loveliness and find himself charmed by a beauty that was the opposite of the artifice he knew. This ideal was not a threat to the aristocratic one, but its necessary shadow, a fantasy of natural, uncomplicated sensuality that the courtly world, in its exhaustion and over-refinement, longed for with a kind of sweet, melancholy ache. It was a beauty of the earth, a reminder of a paradise that the golden chains of fashion had long since left behind. The sounds of the late medieval world, the dry rustle of a silk asterisk hoopelland on a flagstone floor, the jingling of the silver bells sewn onto a knight's belt, the soft, profound silence of a snow-covered courtyard seen from behind a leaded window. These are the sensory textures of an ending, the aesthetic that began with the quiet, scrubbed face of a village maiden has reached its final Baroque phase. It is a beauty of accumulation, of layering, of an almost suffocating richness. Every surface is decorated. The margins of a prayer book team with fantastical beasts and delicate, intertwining flora, a reliquary meant to hold a splinter of a saint's bone, is carved from ivory, so fine it seems to be made of frozen breath, and is studded with pearls and cabochon rubies that glow like drops of holy blood. The armor of a great prince is not just a protective shell. It is a suit of sculpted, gilded steel, its surfaces etched with scenes of chivalric romance. Every rivet a tiny work of art. Beauty is no longer an emanation of the soul, but an elaborate, precious costume that the world is putting on for its final, magnificent masquerade. As the cold moon of this late medieval night climbs higher, imagine a single figure standing on a castle rampart, her immense asterisk hennin silhouetted against the star-pricked sky. She is a pattern of stillness in a world of frantic, beautiful motion. The wind plucks at the long, transparent veil that streams from her hat, a ghostly pennant. She is the very image of the age, distant, unattainable, her face a pale, perfect, unreadable mask. She is a symbol, a masterpiece of artifice. But if you could draw close enough to see into her eyes, you would see, just for a flickering moment, a profound and terrifying exhaustion. It is the look of a world that has dreamed a dream of perfect beauty for 1,000 years, and is beginning to sense that dawn is coming. A dawn that will scatter the delicate, candlelit shadows and reveal the painted scenery for what it is. The coif, the wimple, the towering hennin, the long pointed shoe, they are all, in the end, monuments built on the thin, trembling crust of mortality. Let the wind die down now, and let the figure on the rampart turn slowly, slowly, and retreat into the darkness of a stone doorway. The masquerade is not quite over, but the music has taken on a minor key. The final golden act of our long, quiet quiet story is preparing to begin in the wings. We will step one last time into the intimate chamber where the mirror, that polished disc of metal, holds the face of a world on the very cusp of forgetting its own reflection. For now, let the silence of the Winter Palace be your blanket, and let the ghost of that last, beautiful, melancholy lady guide you into a deep and dreamless sleep. The heavy oaken door to the private chamber closes with a soft, muffled thud, sealing the silence within. The world outside, with its clatter of hooves in the courtyard, and the distant, tinny cry of the watchman, is reduced to a mere murmur, a low hum that only deepens the quiet. This is the innermost sanctuary of the late medieval house, the chamber where the lady retreats not to sleep, but to perform the most intimate ritual of the day. It is a small room, hung with tapestries of deep, muted green that show a unicorn resting its head in the lap of a maiden. A scene of such stillness, it seems to absorb all sound. A fire burns low in the hearth, its flames a lazy dance of gold and amber, casting a warm, pulsing glow over a single, precious object that sits upon a table of polished oak. It is a mirror, but this is not the vast, flawless sheet of glass that you know. It is a small, circular disc, perhaps as wide as a handspan, of polished silver or highly burnished steel, set in a frame of intricately carved ivory. Its surface is slightly convex, curved outward like the surface of a still, metallic pool. To look into a medieval mirror is not to see a sharp, clinical replica of oneself. It is to gaze into a soft, distorted world, a miniature landscape where your face is compressed into the center, surrounded by a halo of shadow and swirling light. The reflection it gives is not a factual document, but an interpretation, a small, luminous portrait with all the harsh edges softened into a gentle, golden blur. In the medieval understanding, this was not a flaw, but a profound truth. The mirror did not lie, for the truth of a person was not the sum of their wrinkles and blemishes, but the essential, soul-like image that shone through the flesh. The convex mirror did what the courtly lover's eye did. It idealized, it distilled. It turned a mortal face into a poetic icon. The lady who sits before this mirror is no longer young by the brutal measure of the time. She has seen perhaps 35 summers, an age where a woman was considered to have passed the first dewy bloom of her beauty and entered a more perilous season. Her hair, once a river of spun gold, is now almost entirely hidden beneath the starched folds of a widow's wimple. For the lord she married at 15 has been dead a decade, a victim of the sweating sickness. Only a few strands are visible at her temples, and they are threaded with silver. The mirror shows her this, but gently, the gray hairs shimmering like filaments of fine, precious metal in the soft firelight. The high, plucked forehead, that magnificent dome of her youth, now has fine lines that the curved silver does not entirely erase. The skin of her cheeks, once as smooth as alabaster, shows the faint, dry texture of a rose petal that has begun to wither at its edge. And yet, as she gazes at her reflection, her expression is not one of despair, but of a quiet, almost detached assessment. She is reading her face like a book of hours, tracing the story of her life in its subtle map. The relationship between a medieval woman and her mirror was a profound and complicated meditation. On one hand, the looking glass was a symbol of vanity, that most insidious of vices. 1,000 sermons warned that the woman who stares into a mirror is staring into the devil's own eyes, that she is committing the sin of Narcissus, falling in love with a fleeting shadow and forgetting the immortal soul within. The mirror was often depicted in moralizing manuscripts as held by a simpering, fashionably dressed woman on the back of a monstrous beast, the two of them riding straight into the gaping mouth of hell. On the other hand, the mirror was also a symbol of prudence, of self-knowledge. The phrase asterisk nos te ipsum asterisk, know thyself, was a classical maxim that the medieval world had baptized. The mirror was the instrument of that divine introspection. A perfectly polished, unblemished mirror was a symbol of the Virgin Mary herself. The speculum sign macula asterisk, the mirror without spot, who reflected God's light without any distortion of sin. The woman who looked into the mirror to correct her appearance, to wash away a smudge of dirt, to straighten her veil, to ensure that her exterior was a clean and orderly reflection of her inner state, was not sinning. She was practicing a form of spiritual discipline. The lady at the window understands this tension in her very bones. She does not gaze to worship herself. She gazes to prepare the mask she must wear to face the world. A mask of serene, noble dignity that protects the fragile, tired soul within. Her hand, its skin showing the delicate tracing of veins, reaches for a small, enameled box. Inside, there is a white ointment, cool and smooth, smelling faintly of pig fat and the crushed root of the white bryony. It is not the lethal ceruse of the earlier age, but a gentler, herbal concoction, a moisturizer to soothe the dry, chapped skin of a winter spent indoors by the smoky fire. She dabs it on her fingertips and massages it into her cheeks with slow, upward circles, a gesture that is at once purely practical and deeply ritualistic. Then a tiny pot of lip salve made from beeswax and the oil of alkanet, a plant root that yields a soft, ruby stain. She touches it to the center of her lips, not to create an artificial cupid's bow, but simply to restore a hint of the color that time has stolen. There is no rouge. A widow does not rouge. Her pale, solemn face is her public badge of honor, a declaration that her beauty is now a closed, internal garden, reserved for the memory of her husband. in her black gown of fine wool, with her white wimple and her pale, unpainted face. She is a study in the aesthetics of grief, a beauty of absence, of a life lived in the shadow of loss. It is a somber, profound beauty, one that the medieval world recognized and deeply respected. The world outside the castle walls, however, thrummed with a different, more vibrant pulse. Descend from the quiet widow's chamber, walk down the winding, slippery steps of the tower, cross the muddy, bustling bailey, and pass under the spiked portcullis. You enter the town, a place of noise, color, and 1,000 human smells, a realm where the ideal of beauty is less a matter of courtly poetry and more a matter of love charms, herbal remedies, and the hard-won, earthy vitality of the common people. The market square on a bright spring morning is a living theater of faces. A farmer's daughter, come to town with a cart of eggs and early greens, has a beauty that owes nothing to the asterisk hennin or the plucked forehead. Her skin is the color of a new-baked loaf of wheaten bread, warm and brown, and dusted with a scatter of sun-kissed freckles across the bridge of a nose that is short and snubbed, not long and fine. Her cheeks bloom with a natural, peony pink flush from the exertion of the walk from the farm. Her hair, a wild tangle of chestnut curls, is bound up in a simple kerchief of undyed linen, but rebellious tendrils have escaped to frame a face that is alight with laughter as she calls out the price of her wares. This is the beauty of the pastoral asterisk made real, not a fantasy of the night's poetry, but a living, breathing girl with dirt under her fingernails and a robust, unself-conscious physical grace. The beauty practices of the peasantry were not written in illuminated manuscripts, but they were no less rich or complex. They were woven into the fabric of the seasons, drawn from the hedgerow and the kitchen garden. A girl wanting a clear, smooth complexion did not go to an apothecary for a leaden paste. She walked barefoot through the dewy grass at dawn on the 1st of May, collecting the water from the hawthorn leaves, a charm as old as the hills. She washed her face in the water from a blacksmith's quenching trough, believed to be imbued with the strength of iron. She might rub her cheeks with a fresh, crushed strawberry to give them a fleeting, rosy stain, or darken her lashes with a paste of soot and almond oil. A trick whispered from mother to daughter. Her ideal of beauty was not the pale, spectral, high-foreheaded mask of the court. It was a beauty of health, of glowing skin, of bright, clear eyes, of a strong, straight back that could carry a heavy yoke, of hips that promised easy childbirth and arms that could rock a cradle without tiring. The medieval village had its own hierarchy of beauty, and its queen was not the most delicate lily, but the most vibrant rose. The apothecary's shop is the bridge between these two worlds. It is a dim, narrow room, its walls lined with shelves of glazed pottery jars, each inscribed with a cryptic Latin abbreviation, R. Rose, for rose, A Mel, for honey, *F, Sam, for elderflower. The air is a complex, heady cocktail of dried herbs, ground spices, wine spirits, and the underlying animal musk of the fats, and oils used as bases for ointments. The apothecary himself, a wiry man in a leather apron, with spectacles balanced on the end of his nose, is a master of a secret and powerful art, the distillation of beauty. In the back of his shop, a copper alembic sits over a small, steady flame, a device that looks like a magical beast. Rose petals are boiled in water, and the steam, carrying the volatile essence of the flower, rises into the cooled, twisting tube of the still, where it condenses, drop by precious drop, into a clear, sweetly perfumed liquid. This is the *Aqua Risata * rosewater, the most universal cosmetic of the medieval world. It is a toner for the skin, a perfume for the body, an ingredient in cooking, a cure for a headache. To possess a small glass vial of it is a luxury that a wealthy merchant's wife and a lady of the castle can share. The apothecary's recipe book, a thick, greasy manuscript passed down from his master, is a compendium of beauty secrets that reads like a strange, poetic alchemy. It contains a recipe for a hair wash to make the tresses gleam like gold, made from the ashes of burnt vines, the yolk of a fresh egg, and a decoction of broom flowers. It has a salve for the hands to keep them white and soft as a dove's breast, made from the boiled, mashed flesh of a gourd, mixed with bitter almond oil and a drop of honey. A more dangerous formula, kept in a locked drawer and sold only with a stern warning, is a depilatory paste of orpiment and quicklime, the same violent chemistry used to burn away the hairlines of noblewomen, which could remove hair, but also, if left too long, burn the skin down to the raw, weeping flesh. The Secrets of the Trotula, a set of texts on women's medicine and cosmetics that circulated under the name of a legendary female physician from Salerno, where the foundational theory, a woman's beauty, was a matter of balancing her humors, of ensuring her body was neither too hot nor too cold, too dry nor too moist. A face erupting in spots was a face with an excess of boiling, choleric blood. The cure might be a cooling diet of lettuce and purslane, and a poultice of ground cucumber and rosewater. A woman whose hair was dull and thin lacked the warm, moist, phlegmatic humor. She was to anoint her scalp with the oil of sweet almonds, in which a handful of wormwood had been steeped under the light of a waxing moon. Beauty was a form of medicine, and the apothecary was its high priest. Yet, even in this world of earthy remedies, the shadow of old age was an inevitability that no alembic could distill away. The medieval world had a profound and ambivalent relationship with the beauty of the crone. On one hand, the old woman was a figure of mockery, the loathly lady of the tales, the wrinkled, white-haired hag who personifies the decay of the flesh. Her sagging breasts, her toothless gums, her stooped back were the subject of crude fabliaux and moralizing tracts that contrasted her with the smooth-skinned maiden. She was what the danse macabre promised everyone would become. On the other hand, the old woman could be a figure of immense power, wisdom, and even a terrible, transformative beauty. In the Arthurian legends, the hideous hag is revealed upon being granted sovereignty by a worthy knight to be a woman of breathtaking beauty, the old age of a holy woman, a mystic like Julian of Norwich, who lived into her 70s, her body wasted by fasting and prayer, was considered beautiful in the eyes of God. Her wrinkles were the inscriptions of a life spent in holy contemplation. Her physical weakness was a transparent veil through which the strength of her soul shone all the more brightly. The old woman in the village, the healer, the midwife, the keeper of herbal lore, possessed a beauty that was entirely in her eyes and her hands. Eyes that held the accumulated knowledge of decades, hands that were skilled and gentle. Her beauty was a quiet, functional grace that had outlived the tyranny of the rosebud mouth. This is the world in its full, layered complexity, a world of the widow's mirror and the peasant girl's strawberry, the apothecary's secret and the crone's wise gaze. And now, the quiet story must turn its attention once more to the great stage, to the final, glorious, and self-conscious performance of chivalric beauty. The pas d'armes, the passage of arms, was a late medieval tournament raised to the level of an elaborate, scripted dream. It was no longer the chaotic melee of earlier centuries, but a theatrical, invitation-only event, staged in a meticulously decorated landscape. A knight styling himself as a romantic hero from the pages of a romance would send out heralds to the courts of Europe, announcing that he would hold a bridge, a gate, or a woodland crossroads for a month, and that any knight who wished to pass must joust with him, his shield tied to a tree as a perpetual challenge. The entire event was draped in a fantasy of Arthurian pageantry. The defending knight might call himself the Knight of the Swan, and his pavilion would be an entire artificial castle of painted canvas and wood. His shield would be a masterpiece of painted allegory, showing a weeping heart pierced by a golden arrow. The visiting knights, the Venon's asterisk, would arrive in a procession of unimaginable splendor, their horses draped in caparisons that cost more than a farm, their lances painted with their ladies' colors. The ladies themselves, watching from a specially constructed scaffold, were not just spectators, but the living idols of the entire ritual. A queen of love and beauty, chosen for her elegance and nobility, presided over the event, and a knight who distinguished himself would kneel before her to receive a token, a jeweled clasp, an embroidered sleeve, which he would wear into his next encounter. This was beauty as a living, breathing, and staggeringly expensive form of storytelling. The most magnificent of these late medieval pageants was the Feast of the Pheasant, held by the Duke of Burgundy in Lille in 1454. It was not just a tournament, but a political and aesthetic manifesto, a vow to launch a crusade expressed through a banquet of hallucinatory luxury. The hall was hung with tapestries of the labors of Hercules. The tables groaned under the weight of fantastical, entremets asterisk, edible sculptures that were works of art. A pie from which a live orchestra of musicians emerged and played. A miniature, fully rigged ship made of sugar. A fountain of glass and gold that flowed with spiced wine. A giant, 18-foot-tall figure of a Saracen walked among the guests. And at the climax of the evening, a live, trained pheasant, a bird of spectacular, iridescent plumage, was brought before the Duke. Upon this bird, and upon a living partridge, the Duke and his knights swore a solemn, chivalric vow to go on crusade. The beauty of the pheasant, the shimmering copper, emerald, and gold of its feathers, was a sacred symbol of the entire enterprise. It was the ultimate fusion of fashion, luxury, piety, and a showmanship so extreme it bordered on a beautiful madness. It was a world trying to conjure the heroic passed back into being through the sheer, overwhelming force of its aesthetic will. But the world outside the jeweled halls of Burgundy was shifting in ways that no grand feast could arrest. A quiet, persistent revolution was taking place in workshops across Europe. A revolution of ink and paper, and the slow, rhythmic creak of a wooden press. The printing press, that most mundane of machines, was changing the very landscape of the imagination, and with it, the concept of beauty. Before the printed page, an ideal face was known only through a priest's description of a saint, a minstrel's song, or a rare, expensive painting on a church wall. It was a local, mutable, deeply personal dream. But the woodcut, printed in a book and sold in 100 towns, began to standardize the ideal. Images of beautiful ladies from the legends of King Arthur or the courts of love, repeated from page to page, created a new kind of visual vocabulary. A young wife in a merchant's house in Nuremberg could now look at a crude but charming woodcut of a lady with a perfectly symmetrical oval face, a tiny closed mouth, and long, rippling hair, and measure herself against it. The woodcut was not a portrait. It was a template. It showed not a real person, but the form of beauty, an abstract pattern that was beginning to float free of the old, particular, hierarchical world. This was the very dawn of a mass media of beauty, and the template itself was beginning to change its proportions. From the south, carried on the trade winds and in the satchels of wandering humanist scholars, came a new language of the body. The Italians, obsessed with the ruins of their classical past, had rediscovered the ancient Greek and Roman texts on harmony and proportion. Vitruvius's description of the perfect human body, inscribed within the ideal geometric forms of the circle and the square, was being studied not as a mystical riddle, but as a blueprint for art and, inevitably, for life. The long, sweeping, vertical flame of the Gothic ideal, the elegance of the asterisk hennin, and the Poullain asterisk, the body as a spire of yearning for heaven, was slowly, almost imperceptibly, being challenged by a new ideal. The body as a temple, a balanced, symmetrical, and self-contained structure of classical harmony. The waist, so rigidly compressed, would begin to lower to its natural place. The high, domed forehead, plucked bare for centuries, would be allowed to be framed by a softer, more natural hairline. The rosebud mouth would relax into a fuller, more expressive shape that could curve into the enigmatic half-smile of a Da Vinci, the medieval ideal of beauty, a dream of unattainable, symbolic grace, was beginning its long, slow metamorphosis into the humanist ideal, a dream of human potential and the measured perfection of the mortal form and the physical substance of the world. The very pigments and oils that painted this beauty into being was also about to change forever. In the year 1492, a Genoese sailor under a Spanish flag made landfall on islands that he believed to be the Indies, the ships that would soon begin to cross the great, unknown ocean were carrying in their holds not just gold and silver, but the seeds of a new aesthetic. From the New World came cochineal, the tiny, dried bodies of a parasitic insect that lived on the prickly pear cactus. When crushed, it produced a red dye of an intensity and vibrancy that the old world had never seen, a scarlet that made the kermes and madder of the medieval dyer look dull and dusty in comparison. The cardinal's robe, the king's ceremonial cloak, the lady's most triumphant gown would soon blaze with this new American crimson. The very color of power and passion was being reborn. Alongside cochineal came new plants, new spices, new ideas that would slowly dismantle the enclosed, symbolic garden of the medieval world and replace it with a vast, open, and unpredictable global landscape. Imagine, then, the last great hall of the medieval era. It is a cold, clear winter's night in the year 1500, a boundary year that no one yet knows is a boundary. The lord of a castle in the English Marches, a man whose grandfather fought in the Wars of the Roses, is holding a feast. It is a lavish but slightly old-fashioned affair. The ladies still wear the tall, steeple hennins, though some of the younger ones have begun to adopt the softer, more rounded French hood that sits further back on the head, showing a hint of hair. The men still wear their doublets padded to a bullet-like curve, and their asterisk Poullain's asterisk of moderate length. But their hair is no longer the flowing, shoulder-length mane It is cut in a blunt, straight bob, a style that speaks of a new, more practical world. The music is a mix of old, haunting troubadour songs and the new, complex polyphony of the continent. The conversation is a mixture of old piety and a new, skeptical wit. The beauty on display is a complex hybrid thing, a last, glorious, and slightly confused gasp of a millennium. A young woman with the pale, smooth face of a medieval icon laughs at a joke with an open, unguarded, and almost Renaissance frankness. A knight with the clean-shaven, melancholy face of a courtly lover is discussing the price of wool and the shocking new ideas of a German monk named Luther. The figure of death, the ever-present partner in the asterisk dance macabre, is still there, but it has retreated to the shadow of the great, roaring fireplace. It is no longer a leering, terrifying skeleton, but a quiet, patient companion, almost a friend. The long obsession with the skull beneath the skin has not bred despair, but a profound, poignant appreciation for the fragile, fleeting warmth of the moment. The lady from the private chamber, the widow, is here, sitting quietly with her women, her white wimple as crisp and perfect as ever. She watches the dancers, the young, beautiful bodies moving in the candlelight, and her expression is one of deep, tranquil acceptance. She has seen the mirror, and she has seen the world beyond it. She knows that her story of beauty, the story of the high forehead and the lily skin, and the secret, suffocating love for a husband she barely knew, is a story that is coming to a close. She holds within her the memory of 1,000 images: the dewy grass of a May morning, the scent of rosewater in a steamy bath, the glitter of a champion's golden helmet, the terrifying, beautiful vision of a saint's stigmata, the cold, smooth feel of the polished silver in her hand. The fire in the great hall burns low. The last notes of the lute fade into the smoky air. The dancers have stopped, their silhouettes melting into the shadows of the tapestry-covered walls. The medieval world, with its singular, towering vision of a beauty that was always a prayer, an allegory, a sacrament, and a fleeting, precious dream, is falling asleep. The high forehead is at peace. The rosebud mouth is relaxed into the faintest of smiles. The golden hair, unbound from its net and wimple for the very last time in the privacy of the imagination, flows down into the deep, silent well of history. The mirror is turned to the wall, and so, gentle listener, the long procession of our story reaches its final, quiet resting place. The voices of the troubadours have become one with the wind in the chimney. The rustle of silk has become one with the whisper of the turning page. The complex, beautiful, fragile, and pious world that dreamed of lilies and hawthorns, that plucked its brow and painted its cheeks, that feared the skull and adored the saint, is folding itself into the soft, velvet darkness of memory. The ideal of the pale skin and the slender body, code of the courtly gaze, the terror, and the comfort of the asterisk, memento mori asterisk. They are not gone. They are the quiet, underground streams that will feed the rivers of beauty for centuries to come. But the dream itself, the complete, self-contained, candlelit cosmos of medieval beauty, is complete. You have walked through its walled garden. You have danced its asterisk dance macabre. You have gazed into its polished silver mirror. Now it is time to let the image fade gently, like the last glowing ember in the hearth. From a vibrant orange to a soft, pulsating red, to a fine white ash, and then to a stillness so deep it is the very essence of peace. Carry the memory of the lady at the well, the knight in the lists, the saint in her cell, like a small, warm, beautifully illuminated miniature in the quiet book of your dreams. Sleep now, and let the silence of the Middle Ages hold you in its gentle, final, and everlasting hand. The dream does not end with the closing of a door, nor with the turning of a mirror to the wall. It lingers, a sweet and stubborn ghost, in the half-light between sleeping and waking, in the soft, gray hour before the dawn of the modern world fully breaks. The year 1500 has come and gone, a silent milestone that no one marked, and the castle on the hill still stands, its stones cold and dreaming under a sky that is slowly, imperceptibly, changing its stars. The lady in the widow's wimple has been laid to rest in the churchyard, her hands folded over a small, polished mirror of silver that they buried with her. A secret, pagan act of love that the priest did not see, but her story, and the story of the beauty she embodied, does not end in the cold earth. It drifts upward, like the scent of incense from a censer, and it mingles with the new air of a world that is already beginning to call itself the Renaissance. If you could walk through the streets of a great city in the year 1520, you would see the old and the new standing side by side, like two dancers who have not yet decided who will lead. The towering, skeletal spires of a Gothic cathedral still pierce the sky, their gargoyles leering down at the bustling square below. But next to the cathedral, a new palace is being built, its lines horizontal and calm, its columns borrowed from the ruins of Rome, its arches perfect semicircles that speak of a new geometry of beauty. The people who move through this square are a living tapestry of transition. An elderly merchant still wears the long, flowing gown of the previous century, his shoes still slightly pointed, his hat a soft, round cap. His grandson, a young man with a sharp, intelligent face, walks beside him in a doublet of slashed velvet, his legs clad in tight hose, his shoes now square-toed and broad, his hair cut short and uncovered, his entire silhouette a bold, square statement of masculine confidence. The grandmother, a woman whose face still bears the faint, faded marks of a lifelong habit of plucking her forehead, wears a gable hood, that stiff, house-shaped headdress of the English court, a last architectural echo of the Hennin asterisk. Her daughter-in-law, the young mother, has adopted the new French hood, a rounded, crescent-shaped cap that sits further back on the head, revealing a carefully arranged band of hair, a style that whispers of a new, softer, and more personal kind of beauty. This is a world in a state of profound aesthetic vertigo, the old language of beauty, the language of the lily and the rose, the high forehead and the rosebud mouth, the enclosing garden and the asterisk dance macabre has not been forgotten. It has become a memory, a rich, dark humus from which new flowers are growing. The Renaissance, for all its proud declarations of a rebirth of classical antiquity, was deeply, almost unconsciously, rooted in the medieval soil it claimed to despise. The very word Gothic, a term of contempt coined by the Italian humanists, was meant to dismiss the architecture of the Middle Ages as the work of barbarians, the Goths who had destroyed Rome. And yet, the soaring, light-filled spaces of a Gothic cathedral, the intricate, jewel-like colors of a stained glass window, the tender, graceful curve of a sculpted Madonna's smile, had seeped into the European soul so deeply that they could never be fully erased. The Renaissance did not simply discard the medieval ideal of beauty. It translated it, reshaped it, and in doing so, carried its essence into the modern world. The first and most powerful ghost of medieval beauty to haunt the new age was the ideal of female pallor. The fashion for a white, luminous, and unblemished skin did not vanish with the asterisk Hennin asterisk. It was simply given a new, classical justification. The ladies of ancient Greece and Rome, the humanists pointed out, had also prized a fair complexion. Homer had sung of white-armed Hera. Ovid, in his Ars Amatoria asterisk, had given detailed advice on how a woman might preserve the whiteness of her skin. The ceruse, the deadly white lead paste that had whitened the faces of medieval noblewomen, was still, tragically, the most effective cosmetic available, and its use continued unabated through the courts of Europe. Elizabeth I of England, the Virgin Queen, a monarch who consciously styled herself as a blend of the medieval Virgin Mary and the classical goddess Diana, famously painted her face with a thick mask of ceruse, creating an iconic, unaging, and otherworldly visage that was the direct descendant of the spectral, high-foreheaded ladies of the Burgundian court. The pale face in the Renaissance, as in the Middle Ages, remained a signifier of nobility, of a life lived away from the sun-drenched labor of the fields, of a body that was a delicate, precious vessel for a refined soul. The high forehead, too, persisted, though in a gentler, more tempered form. The ruthless plucking of the hairline that had created the immense, domed brow of the 14th and 15th centuries slowly fell out of fashion. But the forehead remained a central, expressive feature of beauty, The ideal Renaissance face, as painted by Botticelli or Raphael, has a smooth, serene, and perfectly proportioned brow, framed by soft, natural-looking hair that is often pulled back, but not scraped away. The eyebrows, once plucked to invisibility, return, but they are fine, arched, and serene, not the bold, dark slashes of a later age. The forehead of a Botticelli Venus is a calm, untroubled sea of alabaster, a space of pure, contemplative beauty that echoes the medieval ideal of the forehead as the seat of noble thought, but now inflected with a classical sense of geometric harmony, the humanist obsession with proportion, with the mathematical ratios of the perfect body as described by Vitruvius, was not a complete rejection of the Gothic aesthetic. It was a retuning of it, shifting the emphasis from a vertical, heaven-yearning line to a balanced, self-contained, and earthly perfection. The garden, that most potent of medieval symbols, did not vanish either. The Hortus Conclusus asterisk, the walled, enclosed garden of the Virgin and of courtly love, was reborn in the Renaissance as the formal Italian garden, a space of geometric parterres, clipped box hedges, and silent, contemplative statues. The wild, fragrant profusion of the medieval pleasance, with its raised beds of roses and lilies, its bubbling fountains, and its turf benches, was tamed, ordered, and symmetrically arranged, but its symbolic soul remained. It was still a place of retreat, a sanctuary from the noise of the world, a space where beauty could be cultivated and contemplated in private. The lady who walked in a Renaissance garden, her hair dressed with pearls, her gown of heavy silk rustling over the gravel paths, was still the direct inheritor of the lady who sat on a time-scented bench in a medieval romance, listening to a troubadour's lute. The flowers around her had the same silent language. The white lily still spoke of purity, the red rose of love and suffering, the violet of humility. The medieval symbolic code of nature was not broken. It was simply rewritten in a more orderly, classical hand. The cult of the blonde, that relentless pursuit of golden hair that had seen medieval women sitting for hours on sun-baked battlements, their tresses soaked in lye and saffron, did not fade, but was, if anything, intensified by the rediscovery of classical art. The Roman goddesses, as imagined by the Renaissance painters, were almost invariably blonde. The hair of Venus, as she rises from her shell in Botticelli's masterpiece, is not merely gold. It is a cascade of pure, liquid light, a river of silk that flows around her body in a way that is both modest and intensely sensual. This is the medieval ideal of the asterisk blonde ox longs, cheveux taken to its absolute, transcendent conclusion. Women still bleached their hair, now with more sophisticated recipes imported from Italy. A Venetian book of secrets from the mid-16th century gives a long, complex formula for Asterisk Bayonda, the golden blonde, involving honey, black sulfur, and endless hours of drying in the sun, a treatment that required a special, broad-brimmed hat called Asterisk Solana Asterisk, the very same crownless hat used by medieval ladies, allowing the hair to be spread out in the sun, while the precious pale face was kept in the shade. The Renaissance blazon, the poetic catalogue of the beloved's perfect parts, inherited the entire medieval vocabulary of precious metals and gems. A beautiful woman's hair was still golden wires, her cheeks roses and cream, her neck a tower of ivory, her eyes sapphires or stars. The metaphors were the same, even if the structure of the poem was now a Petrarchan sonnet, rather than a troubadour's asterisk canso asterisk. The troubadours themselves were dead, their Provençal language a fading memory, but their spirit was reincarnated in the poets and playwrights of the New Age. The whole elaborate code of courtly love, the veneration of the beloved as a distant, almost divine figure, the sweet, wasting melancholy of the lover, the secret sighs and the sleepless nights, was the very lifeblood of the Renaissance sonnet cycle. Petrarch, the Italian poet whose name became synonymous with the form, spent his life writing poems to a woman named Laura, a figure who is, in every way, the direct descendant of the unattainable asterisk, Domna asterisk, of the troubadours. Laura is beautiful, blonde, pale, and utterly unattainable. She is not a wife to be won, but a distant star to be adored from afar. Petrarch's descriptions of his own suffering, his trembling, his inability to sleep or eat, his body turned into a theater of exquisite pain at the mere sight of her, are a perfect textbook performance of the medieval asterisk malady of love, the medieval language of love, the belief that beauty was a power that could refine the soul of the man who contemplated it, was not just preserved, it was canonized, set into the very foundation of modern European love poetry, when Shakespeare writes in his sonnets of a beloved whose beauty is an eternal summer that shall not fade. He is singing the last and the greatest of the troubadour songs, even the asterisk dance macabre asterisk, that most medieval of obsessions, did not simply vanish in the bright, optimistic light of the Renaissance. It went underground, surfacing in new and unsettling forms. The skull, the asterisk memento mori asterisk, became a standard prop in the portraits of the wealthy and powerful. A beautifully dressed merchant or a young, handsome prince would be painted with his hand resting gently and thoughtfully on a human skull. This was not a morbid, fearful gesture, but a statement of wisdom, of a humanist's acceptance of mortality. The medieval dance macabre had taught that death was the great leveler, the force that would strip the pope and the peasant of their earthly masks. The Renaissance transformed this into a more personal, philosophical meditation on the fleeting nature of earthly beauty and achievement. The skull on the desk of a scholar was a silent companion, a reminder to live a meaningful life. The beautiful young woman in a portrait, her skin luminous, her jewels glittering, might hold a single wilting flower, its petals about to fall, a symbol of her own transient bloom. This was the medieval lesson of the trancy tomb, internalized and made into a quiet, elegant, and deeply personal form of introspection. The shadow of the plague had receded, but the memory of its lesson, that beauty was a fragile, borrowed garment, remained. The physical care of the body, the recipes and rituals of the bathhouse and the apothecary also survived, often in remarkably direct lines of transmission. The printed books of secrets that began to circulate in the 16th century were filled with recipes that a medieval housewife or a castle lady would have recognized instantly. A popular Italian manual, Gli Ornamenti del Don, is essentially a printed version of the medieval trotula tradition, updated with new ingredients and a more elaborate, almost alchemical language. You can still wash your face in morning dew collected from the fennel leaves on the 1st of May. You can still whiten your skin with a paste of ground lily root and honey. You can still tint your lips with the ruby stain of the alkanet root. The great herbalists of the Renaissance, men like William Turner and John Gerard, wrote their massive, illustrated catalogs of plants in a way that was both scientific and deeply traditional, preserving the medieval knowledge of the garden and the hedgerow. The old woman in the village, the healer with her knowledge of the uses of sage and rosemary, was not swept away by the new science. She was, in many places, the primary source of medical and cosmetic knowledge for the poor. Her practice, a living, unbroken thread stretching back into the deep, unrecorded past. The very texture of the body, the ideal of how it should look and move, was a slow evolution from the medieval template. The slender, elongated, androgynous grace of the Gothic courtier, with his clean-shaven face and his flowing, golden hair, gave way to a more muscular, more overtly masculine ideal. The rediscovery of classical sculpture played a crucial role. The David asterisk of Michelangelo, carved from a single block of white Carrara marble at the very beginning of the 16th century, is the manifesto of a new male beauty. He is not a slender, melancholy troubadour. He is a tense, coiled spring of potential energy, his body a study in anatomical perfection, every muscle and sinew clearly defined. And yet, for all its classical inspiration, the figure retains a deeply medieval quality of interiority. David's brow is furrowed in thought. His gaze is distant and contemplative. He is not a mindless classical athlete. He is a thinking, feeling being, a man facing a giant with a combination of courage and profound, almost spiritual concentration. This is the medieval ideal of the knight, as a man of both action and prayer, translated into the marble of a classical god. The male body beautiful was becoming a celebration of physical power, but it had not yet lost its medieval soul, the act of portraiture itself, which had begun to emerge tentatively in the late medieval world with artists like Jan van Eyck, now became the dominant genre of the age. And in the portraits of the Renaissance, we see the final, beautiful blooming of the medieval impulse to read the face as a map of the soul. The face of a Hans Holbein sitter is a landscape of character. The lines around the mouth speak of a life of stern judgments. The set of the jaw of an unyielding will. The cool, intelligent gleam in the eye of a mind that is weighing and measuring everything it sees. This was not a repudiation of the medieval ideal of the face as a reflection of inner virtue, but its ultimate secular realization. The beautiful face was no longer just a mirror of God's grace or a symbol of a fixed social order. It was a window into a unique, individual human soul with all its complexities, ambitions, and quiet sorrows. The medieval belief that the body was a text to be read, a visible expression of the invisible self, became the foundational premise of modern portraiture. And what of the poor body, the body of the peasant, the body that had been the earthy, unspoken counterpoint to the airy idealizations of the court, the Renaissance pastoral, the idealized vision of shepherds and shepherdesses, was a direct and self-conscious revival of the medieval pastoral asterisk. The courtly world, exhausted by its own artifice, still longed for a fantasy of natural, uncomplicated beauty. The shepherdess of a 16th century pastoral poem has the same sun-kissed skin, the same wild, flower-crowned hair, the same spontaneous, laughing grace as her medieval counterpart. The aristocrats of the French court, under the influence of Queen Marie Antoinette, would later build a fake peasant village at Versailles, the Hameau de la Reine, where they could dress in simple muslin and play at being milkmaids, a bizarre and poignant tribute to the enduring power of the pastoral ideal, the beauty of the working body, the body that was strong and healthy and close to the earth, was an aesthetic fantasy that the Middle Ages had bequeathed to its successors, a dream of Eden that would be revisited again and again. The most profound continuity, however, was the ongoing, silent, and inescapable dance between beauty and death. The Renaissance, for all its celebration of human potential, lived under the same mortal shadow as the Middle Ages. Plague still returned, war was still a constant scourge, and the average life expectancy had not changed. The beautiful young bodies painted by Raphael and Titian are, if you look closely, always touched by a gentle, elegiac sadness. The golden light that suffuses a Venetian painting is a light that is already fading, a late afternoon sun that speaks of beauty's fleeting, precious nature. The motto asterisk et in Arcadia ego asterisk. Even in Arcadia, I death am there, became a central theme of the Baroque sensibility. A painting of a perfect pastoral paradise would include, in a shadowy corner, a weathered tomb, a silent reminder that the beautiful shepherds and shepherdesses were dancing on borrowed time. This was not the hysterical, frenzied asterisk dance macabre of the plague years, but a calmer, more philosophical, and infinitely more poignant meditation on the transience of all earthly loveliness. The medieval lesson had been learned, and it had mellowed into a bittersweet wisdom. The lady in the wimple, our sleeping guide, would find much that was strange in this new world, but she would not be lost. If she could walk through a palace in Florence or Fontainebleau, she would see, beneath the classical drapery and the mythological frescoes, the familiar, beloved forms of her own inner life. She would see the lily and the rose, the enclosed garden and the singing poet, the pale forehead and the golden hair, the polished mirror and the gentle, warning skull. She would know that the dream of beauty she had lived and breathed had not died, but had simply passed into a new key, sung in the grand, polyphonic music of the modern world. The story of medieval beauty does not have a clean, sharp ending. It is a river that disappears underground, flowing through the dark, and emerging miles and centuries later in springs and fountains that still refresh the gardens of the present. Lie still now, and let the last, lingering note of the troubadour's lute fade into the deepest silence you have ever known. The castle on the hill is a ruin now, its stones soft with moss and lichen, its great hall a home for owls and ivy. The mirror of polished silver, buried for 500 years in the quiet earth of the churchyard, has turned black and unrecognizable, its surface a tarnished record of a face that once gazed into it with quiet, dignified hope. But the beauty it reflected, the idea of the high, serene forehead, the rosebud mouth, the lily-white hand, the golden torrent of hair, the slender, elegant body that was a prayer in physical form, is not gone. It is a whisper in the very language you use to describe what is lovely, a ghostly architect of the chambers of your own heart. The Middle Ages are asleep, deeply and peacefully asleep, but their dream of beauty is the dream you are dreaming still. The long, quiet story is not over. It has simply passed into the stillness that holds all things. And in that stillness, if you listen with the ear of your sleeping soul, you can still hear, faint but unceasing, the sound of a fountain playing in an enclosed garden, a sound that is the very heartbeat of beauty itself. The river of beauty, having vanished beneath the bright, hard hills of the Renaissance, has not ceased to flow. It has simply gone underground, a hidden, silent current moving through the dark, porous limestone of the centuries. And now, in the quiet of this deep and dream-filled hour, it begins to emerge again, as a rushing torrent, but as a slow, meandering stream, spreading out into a wide, marshy delta where the past and the present mingle their waters in an endless, gentle confluence. The story of medieval beauty, the story you have been dreaming for so many nights, is not a story with a sharp, decisive end. It is a story that dissolves, like a drop of honey in warm water, into the vast, sweet ocean of the modern world. And to trace that dissolution, to follow the golden threads as they unravel and reweave themselves into new patterns, is the task of this long, quiet hour before the dawn. Let your mind settle now, as the last, faint echoes of the troubadour's lute die away into the absolute stillness. The castle on the hill, the one you have visited so many times in these dreams, is a ruin. Its stones are softened with a thick, green velvet of moss. Its battlements are broken teeth against a pale, pre-dawn sky. Its great hall is a silent, roofless nave where owls roost in the empty window frames, and ivy climbs over the cold, blackened hearth. The lady in the widow's wimple, your gentle, melancholy guide, is long gone. The mirror of polished silver, buried with her in the quiet earth of the churchyard, has turned to a dark, unrecognizable lump of tarnished metal, a clod of earth that holds, within its corrupted heart, the ghost of a face that once gazed into it with dignified, uncomplaining hope. But the beauty she lived and breathed, the intricate, pious, and deeply symbolic ideal of the medieval world, has not perished. It has become a ghost, a quiet, persistent phantom that haunts the chambers of the Western imagination, its footsteps soft and barely audible, but never entirely still. To understand how this ghost survived, you must first walk through the cold, white light of a new kind of morning, a morning that broke over Europe in the early decades of the 16th century with the sound of hammering, not the hammering of a sculptor on marble, but the hammering of nails into a church door. The Reformation, that great, convulsive shattering of Western Christendom, was also, in ways both obvious and subtle, a revolution in the concept of beauty. Martin Luther, an Augustinian monk with the soul of a medieval penitent, nailed his 95 theses to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church in 1517, and the sound of that hammer was the death knell of a 1,000-year-old aesthetic order. The medieval ideal of beauty, as you have come to know it so intimately, was built on a foundation of incarnation. The body was not an obstacle to the soul, but its visible, tangible expression. The gold and jewels of a reliquary, the painted and carved faces of the saints, the soaring, jewel-colored windows of the cathedrals, the elaborate vestments of the clergy, the very concept that a beautiful face was a mirror of God's grace. All of this was predicated on the idea that the divine could and did manifest itself in the material world, that beauty was a ladder that the soul could climb towards God. The reformers, in their fierce, passionate desire to return to the pure, unadorned word of Scripture, took a long, hard look at this glittering, gorgeous edifice and declared it to be a whited sepulchre, a house of idols, a distraction from the inner, invisible grace that was the only true beauty. The iconoclasm that swept through the Protestant cities of Northern Europe was not merely a theological argument made with words. It was a violent, visceral, and deeply aesthetic act, a deliberate, systematic destruction of beauty in the name of a higher, purer truth. Whitewashed walls replaced the vibrant, storytelling frescoes. Plain, clear glass replaced the jewel-toned windows that had turned sunlight into a supernatural, chromatic prayer. The statues of the saints, those serene, elongated figures with their high, plucked foreheads and their rosebud mouths, were pulled from their niches and smashed, their broken stone faces a stark, terrifying anti-beauty. The elaborate vestments, the embroidered copes, and the jeweled mitres were burned or sold, the very act of adorning the body for worship. The medieval belief that the best and most beautiful material things should be offered to God was condemned as a form of whorish vanity, a relic of the Babylonian captivity of the Church. In the stark, whitewashed interiors of a Dutch Reformed church, beauty was not abolished, but radically, breathtakingly redefined. It was no longer a matter of the eye, but of the ear and the soul. The beauty of a plain, unadorned congregation, listening to the pure, unmediated word of God. The beauty of a simple, sincere heart. The beauty of a life lived in sober, industrious obedience. This was the new, austere aesthetic of the Reformation. The high, plucked forehead of a painted Madonna was replaced by the starched, white linen coif of a burgher's wife. A coif that was a symbol not of ethereal, courtly grace, but of domestic piety and moral cleanliness. The body was no longer a page in a book of divine symbols, but a vessel of potential sin that must be clothed in modesty and sober, dark colors. The black gown of a Protestant merchant was a new kind of beautiful garment, a garment that spoke of moral seriousness, of a rejection of the vain, colorful, and hierarchical display of the old Catholic courts. And yet, the ghost of medieval beauty was not so easily exorcised. Even as the iconoclasts smashed the faces of the stone saints, the old, deep-rooted habits of the heart and the body persisted. The women of the Protestant towns might have worn sober, dark gowns and plain linen coifs, but they still desired the clear, pale skin that had been the hallmark of beauty for 1,000 years. The apothecary's shop, with its rosewater and its alkanet root, still did a brisk trade, though the recipes were now whispered with a slightly more furtive air. The love of a smooth, unblemished complexion was not a Catholic or a Protestant impulse. It was a human one, and it survived the theological earthquake intact. The pastoral ideal, the dream of the natural, unadorned beauty of the shepherdess took on a new Protestant inflection. The simple, rosy-cheeked maiden, with her hair covered by a plain kerchief and her body clad in homespun wool, was celebrated not as a fantasy of courtly escape, but as the true, godly ideal of womanhood, a helpmeet for man, her beauty rooted in health, modesty, and the quiet strength of her domestic virtues. The medieval cult of the Virgin Mary, the spotless mirror, was dethroned. But the archetype of the pure, selfless, and gently beautiful woman was simply translated into the secular sphere, becoming the model for the ideal wife and mother. Meanwhile, in the parts of Europe that remained loyal to the old faith, the medieval aesthetic did not just survive. It entered a new, astonishingly opulent, and emotionally charged phase. The Counter-Reformation, the Catholic Church's response to the Protestant challenge, embraced beauty as a weapon, a tool of persuasion, a visible, overwhelming argument for the truth and glory of the Church. The Baroque style, which began to bloom in Rome at the end of the 16th century, was the direct, if transformed, descendant of the Gothic, where the Gothic cathedral had used soaring, vertical lines and jewel-colored light to pull the soul towards heaven. The Baroque church used a dynamic, swirling, and intensely theatrical language of form. The white, classical columns of the Renaissance were twisted into spiraling, energetic shapes. The ceilings exploded with frescoes of saints and angels, their bodies tumbling and soaring through painted skies of infinite, golden depth. The sculpted figures of the saints were no longer the serene, elongated, and slightly melancholy figures of the medieval imagination. They were figures of ecstasy, of dramatic bodily rapture, the face of Saint Teresa of Avila, as carved by Bernini in the moment of her mystical transfiguration, is the ultimate Baroque expression of a beauty that is both intensely physical and utterly spiritual. Her eyes are closed, her lips parted in a moan of exquisite, unbearable sweetness, her body limp under the folds of her heavy, chaotic drapery. This is the beauty of the medieval saint, the beauty of suffering and divine union, but translated into a language of such intense, sensual drama that it takes the breath away. The high, plucked forehead is gone, replaced by a more natural, human face. But the core medieval belief that the body in a state of grace could be the vessel of a supernatural, visible beauty is more alive than ever. The gold, the jewels, the swirling, emotional music of a Palestrina Mass, the heady scent of incense, all of these were the medieval sensory apparatus of worship, refined and intensified into an art form that was meant to overwhelm the senses and sweep the soul into the arms of the Church, as the Catholic South and the Protestant North diverged in their official aesthetic theologies. The underlying popular culture of beauty, the world of folk remedies and whispered charms, continued its slow, steady, and largely unchanging life. The knowledge of the hedgerow and the kitchen garden, the lore of the trotula, did not vanish with the advent of printing. It was, in fact, amplified by it. The printed books of secrets, the cheap, popular manuals that began to flood the markets of Europe, were filled with beauty recipes that would have been instantly recognizable to a medieval housewife. You could still gather the morning dew from the hawthorn leaves on the 1st of May to wash your face and ensure a clear complexion for the year. You could still steep rosemary in white wine to make a hair rinse that would darken and strengthen the tresses. You could still apply a poultice of crushed strawberries to soothe a sunburned cheek. The apothecary's shop, with its rows of glazed jars and its heady, complex scent, remained the central depot of beauty for the urban middle classes, a place where the old, herbal wisdom of the Middle Ages was sold alongside the new, exotic ingredients arriving from the Americas and the East. The search for the perfect skin lightener, the ideal hair dye, the most effective depilatory paste, was a continuous, unbroken quest that linked the lady in the Burgundian hennin directly to her great-great-granddaughter in the rough collar of the Elizabethan court. The Elizabethan court itself, that glittering, precarious, and utterly fascinating moment in the history of beauty, was a theater where all the old medieval ghosts danced one last, magnificent, and highly self-conscious masque. Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, was a monarch who understood, with an almost superhuman political instinct, the power of the medieval aesthetic legacy. Her face, painted with the thick, white mask of ceruse, and illuminated with the bright, red dot of vermilion on her lips, was a direct, deliberate invocation of the medieval icon. She was not just a woman. She was an image, a sacred, unaging idol of power. Her vast, elaborate gowns, her ruffs of starched, translucent linen that framed her face like a halo of frozen light, her wigs of spun gold red hair, her gowns encrusted with pearls and emeralds. All of this was the language of the medieval houppelande and the hennin, translated into the idiom of the new, globalized luxury trade. Pearls, the favorite jewel of the medieval court, symbols of purity and tears, were draped over her in ropes and cascades. Her pale, unblemished face, untouched by the sun, was the high, plucked forehead of the Gothic lady made sovereign. She was simultaneously the Virgin Mary of a Protestant nation. The classical goddess Estria returned to rule a golden age, and the unattainable asterisk domina asterisk of the old troubadour songs, the distant, beautiful lady to whom all her courtiers swore their chivalric and political fealty, the poetry written to her by men like Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Philip Sidney, was the last glorious flowering of the troubadour tradition, the language of courtly love, now fully fused with the language of political power, to be a beautiful courtier in Elizabeth's court was to make one's own body a walking sonnet to the Queen, a display of grace, wit, and elegant, self-deprecating melancholy that was the direct, if highly stylized, descendant of the knight pining for his unattainable lady in the walled garden. The male body beautiful, in this late Tudor and early Stuart world, continued its long, slow evolution from the slender, androgynous grace of the Gothic courtier towards a more overtly masculine, but still exquisitely refined, ideal, the courtier of Castiglioni's asterisk book of the courtier asterisk, a text that was to manners what the Trotula was to cosmetics, was the new template. He was to be a man of arms and letters, a soldier who could also compose a sonnet, a wrestler who could dance a galliard with effortless, invisible skill. His beauty was a quality of asterisk sprezzatura asterisk, a studied nonchalance that concealed the immense effort required to achieve it. His body clad in silks and velvets, his legs shone to advantage in tight hose, his beard carefully trimmed to a sharp, elegant point, was a work of art as deliberate as any painting. The melancholy lover, the man who sighed and grew pale, and could not sleep for the image of his beloved, was still a potent ideal. Robert Burton's asterisk anatomy of melancholy asterisk, published in 1621, was a vast, encyclopedic study of this beautiful, painful sickness, a medical and philosophical treatise that was also a love letter to the medieval concept of the asterisk malady of love. The handsome, brooding, dark-haired cavalier of the 17th century, with his flowing locks, his lace collar, his plumed hat, and his world-weary, noble sadness, was the direct heir of the pale, sighing knight who had knelt before his lady in the Hortus Conclusus asterisk. The ghost of the troubadour was alive and well, and he had learned to fence and quote Ovid. Yet, even as the old ghosts danced, a new, cold, and pitiless light was beginning to dawn. It was the light of a new science, a new way of looking at the body that would, over the course of the following centuries, slowly dismantle the ancient, symbolic language of beauty and replace it with a language of anatomy, physiology, and eventually commerce. The medieval body was a body of humors, a fluid, dynamic system where a beautiful complexion was a sign of a balanced soul. The Renaissance body, as revealed by the anatomists who began to dissect corpses in the theaters of Padua and Bologna, was a machine of flesh, bone, and sinew. The beautiful surface of the skin was no longer a mysterious, luminous veil of the soul. It was an organ, a tissue that could be studied, mapped, and eventually manipulated. The rise of empirical science, the slow, painstaking accumulation of facts about the natural world, did not immediately destroy the old beauty lore, but it began to shift its ground. Nicholas Culpeper, the great English herbalist of the mid-17th century, wrote his complete herbal asterisk in a way that was both deeply traditional and pointedly reformist. He translated the Latin of the apothecaries into plain English, democratizing the medical and cosmetic knowledge that had once been the guarded secret of a professional elite. The old recipes for facial washes and hair tonics were still there, but they were now presented as matters of botanical fact and astrological influence, a science of the earth, rather than as a mysterious, quasi-magical art, the discovery of the New World, which had already brought cochineal to dye the lips of Europe a more brilliant scarlet, continued to transform the material palette of beauty. New plants, new oils, new fats and pigments arrived on every ship. Tobacco, that strange, seductive weed, was initially believed to have medicinal and even cosmetic properties. Chocolate, the dark, bitter drink of the Aztecs, became the fashionable, luxurious beverage of the European courts, believed to nourish the body and soothe the nerves, contributing to a beautiful, serene disposition. The potato, that humble tuber, slowly began to change the European diet, and with it, the very substance of the peasant body, making it more robust and altering the centuries-old physical types of the rural poor. The world was becoming a vast, global apothecary shop, and the definition of beauty, once a local, deeply rooted language of a particular valley or town, was beginning its long, slow journey towards a globalized, homogenized standard in the intimate, private chambers of the wealthy. A new object was beginning to displace the small, convex mirror of polished metal. The glass mirror, a technological marvel perfected in the glassworks of Murano in Venice, began to spread across Europe. It was a sheet of clear, crystalline glass, backed with a thin film of mercury and tin, and it reflected the face with a shocking, pitiless clarity that no previous age had ever known. For the first time in human history, a person could see themselves as others saw them. Every pore, every blemish, every fine line around the eye, rendered in sharp, unambiguous detail. The medieval mirror had been a tool of contemplation, a gentle, idealizing eye that turned the face into a soft, luminous icon. The new Venetian mirror was a tool of self-scrutiny, a judge, a critic. It did not idealize, it revealed. And this new, stark encounter with the unvarnished self began to transform the practice of beauty. The art of the cosmetician became less a matter of creating a symbolic, idealized mask, and more a matter of correcting the flaws, concealing the imperfections, and simulating the signs of a health and youth that the mirror so cruelly showed to be fleeting. The modern anxiety of the self, the anxious, obsessive scrutiny of one's own face for signs of age and decay, was born in the soft, reflected light of the Venetian looking glass. The medieval woman had looked into her convex, silver mirror and seen a soul, the early modern woman looked into her flat glass mirror and began to see a problem to be solved. And yet, the old consolations remained. The garden, the enclosed sanctuary, continued to be a place of retreat and contemplation. The formal, geometric gardens of the Renaissance and the Baroque, with their clipped hedges, their marble fountains, and their silent, contemplative statues of classical gods and goddesses, were still, in their deepest symbolic essence, the walled asterisk hortus conclusus of the medieval imagination. To walk in a garden was to step out of the noise and chaos of the world and into a space of ordered, harmonious beauty where the soul could be at peace. The flowers, the herbs, the trees still spoke their silent, symbolic language. The rose was still the queen of love, the lily the emblem of purity, the cypress tree the somber sign of mourning. The medieval habit of reading the natural world as a book of divine symbols was fading among the learned, but it persisted in the deep, poetic undercurrents of the culture when a poet of the 17th century, like Andrew Marvell, wrote of his coy mistress that the grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do their embrace. He was speaking in the voice of the asterisk carpe diem asterisk tradition. But the shadow that falls over the poem is the shadow of the asterisk dance macabre, the ancient, grinning skull that waits beneath the garden's loveliest rose, the urgency of earthly beauty, the desperate, poignant need to seize it before it is too late, was a medieval emotion that the scientific revolution did nothing to dispel. The beauty of old age, that most difficult and profound of aesthetic challenges, continued to be a site of deep cultural ambivalence. The old woman, the crone, was still a figure of mockery in the popular comic literature and the body plays of the time. Her wrinkles, her toothless gums, her sagging breasts were the subject of crude jests that had not changed in centuries. And yet, the old woman of wisdom, the healer, the midwife, the keeper of the herbal lore, still commanded a quiet, profound respect. The beauty of the aging, faithful wife, the matron who had borne many children and managed a large household with prudence and skill, was celebrated in the domestic literature of the Protestant middle class. Her face, lined with the record of a life of duty and care, was not the smooth, blank page of the young maiden, but a deeply inscribed text of experience and moral worth. This was a new kind of beauty, a beauty of character, of a soul made visible through the long, slow weathering of time. The medieval world had known this beauty in its saints and its holy hermits. The early modern world began to extend it, tentatively, to the ordinary, godly woman of the household. The most radical transformation, however, was occurring in the very philosophy of the body. The medieval world had seen the body as a microcosm, a small, complete reflection of the great, ordered cosmos. The proportions of the body were a divine language, a set of harmonies that echoed the music of the spheres. The Renaissance, with its rediscovery of Vitruvius and its passion for anatomical dissection, began to replace this symbolic, mystical body with a body that was measured, mapped, and mathematically proportioned. Leonardo da Vinci's asterisk, Vitruvian Man, asterisk, that iconic drawing of a male figure inscribed within a circle and a square, was the perfect emblem of this transition. The body was still beautiful, still a reflection of a divine order, but that order was now understood not through the symbolic language of the bestiary and the flower garden, but through the precise, universal language of geometry. The ideal of beauty was becoming a matter of rational, measurable proportion, a set of objective rules that could be studied and applied. The old medieval hierarchy of beauty, where a noble woman's body was inherently more beautiful because it was the vessel of a noble soul, was slowly giving way to a new, more democratic, and more anxious idea. That beauty was a set of physical attributes that could, in theory, be achieved by anyone with the right knowledge, the right discipline, and the right cosmetics. The beautiful body was beginning its long, slow transformation from a gift of grace to a project of work. And yet, in the quiet of the night, when the candles are blown out and the glass mirror is covered with a cloth, the old medieval ghost still walks. It walks in the stories we tell about love, stories that still, at their deepest core, echo the structure of the troubadour's song. The lover who is ennobled by his devotion to a distant, beautiful, and slightly unattainable beloved. It walks in the way a bride dresses on her wedding day, in the long, white gown, and the veil that are the direct, secular descendants of the medieval virgin's consecration garment, a costume that speaks of purity, transformation, and the passage from one state of life to another. It walks in the quiet, persistent superstitions of the cosmetics counter, the belief that a cream can be a potion, that a certain oil can be a charm, that beauty can be distilled from a flower and captured in a bottle. The apothecary has become the chemist. The wise woman has become the beautician. But the ancient, alchemical dream of transforming the base metal of the ordinary body into the gold of the beautiful one is still the same. The story of beauty in the medieval world, the story you have been dreaming for so long, is not a relic in a museum case. It is the very water in which you swim, the air you breathe. The next time you look at a face that moves you, look closely at the language you use to describe it. You will see the ghost of the lily and the rose, the echo of the high, serene forehead, the distant, fading light of the golden hair that was once compared to the sunbeams trapped in silk. The medieval dream of beauty is the dream you are dreaming still. A dream of a body that is a visible, radiant sign of a soul at peace. A dream of a garden where the fountain plays forever. A dream that the skull beneath the skin is not the end of the story, but the door to a beauty that is eternal. And so, as the long, slow night of history deepens, let your own consciousness drift gently, like a leaf on the surface of that slow, meandering river. The Reformation has whitewashed the walls. The Renaissance has mapped the body. The New World has sent its strange, exotic fruits across the sea. The glass mirror has shown the face its own, unblinking truth. But the water of the river is still the same water that flowed past the feet of the maiden at the well. Still the same water that steamed in the wooden tubs of the bathhouse. Still the same water that was distilled, drop by precious drop, in the copper alembic of the apothecary. The dream is flowing, and you are floating in it, weightless, timeless, cradled in the arms of a story that has no end. Let the images of this long, quiet chapter rise and fall like the soft, regular breathing of a sleeping child. Picture for a moment a woman in a plain, black gown and a starched, white coif, sitting in a pew of a Dutch Reformed church, listening to the long, rolling periods of a sermon. Her face is pale and unadorned. Her hands are folded. Her expression is one of deep, inward concentration. She is beautiful, not in the way the lady in the asterisk hennin asterisk was beautiful, but in a new, sober, and intensely moral way. She is the heir of the medieval saint, the woman who has renounced the world to become a vessel of inner grace. But she has done so not in a cloistered cell, but in the heart of a bustling, commercial city. Now let that image dissolve and be replaced by another. A woman in a vast, farthingale gown of white satin, her face a perfect, painted mask of ceruse, her red gold hair built into an elaborate, jeweled confection, dancing a stately pavane in the court of Elizabeth. She is the heir of the Burgundian lady, the one who watched the asterisk dance macabre with a knowing, melancholy eye. She too knows that the skull is beneath the paint, but she dances on, a magnificent, tragic, and utterly beautiful defiance of the inevitable. Now let her dissolve, and see a young man in a lace collar and a plumed hat, his dark eyes filled with a sweet, unnameable sorrow, a volume of Petrarch's sonnets in his gloved hand. He is walking alone in a formal garden of clipped yew hedges, pausing to touch the petal of a red velvet rose. He is the troubadour, reborn in the age of the duel, and the sonnet, still sighing, still pining, still making of his own aching heart a work of art. These figures are all fading now, their colors bleeding softly into the gray pre-dawn light. The river is widening, slowing, spreading out into a vast, silent estuary. The individual forms are becoming less distinct, merging into a single, continuous flow of inherited memory, of half-remembered images, of a beauty that was, and is, and will be, the maiden at the well, the lady in the garden, the knight in the lists, the saint in her cell, the widow with her mirror, the apothecary with his alembic, peasant girl with her strawberry-stained lips. They are all here, in the water, dissolving like drops of honey, sweetening the vast, dark sea of the modern imagination. The story is not over. It has simply become so vast, so deeply woven into the fabric of your own consciousness, that you can no longer see its edges. You are inside the dream, and the dream is inside you. Rest now in the quiet of this endless, meandering river. The banks are soft with moss. The sky above is a deep, velvet canopy of stars that are just beginning to fade. The sound of the water is a low, continuous murmur, a lullaby that has been singing for 1,000 years. The ghost of the medieval world, the world of the high forehead and the rosebud mouth, the lily and the rose, the walled garden and the asterisk dance macabre, is walking beside you on the bank, a silent, gentle companion in a long, flowing gown of faded silk. She does not speak, but her presence is a comfort, a reminder that the beauty you seek, the beauty you dream of, has a long, deep, and sacred history. She is the past, and she is also, in some quiet, mysterious way, your own sleeping soul. Let her walk with you, and let the river carry you slowly, gently, into the deep, silent, and dreamless waters of the night. The next bend in the river, the next chapter in the long, quiet story, will reveal itself when you are ready to see it.